Chapter 1435. Seeing Lu Ping defeat a late Dharma adept so easily, even Qi Lianying, who had been by Lu Ping's side, was shocked. Even she did not know if Lu Ping was still by her side, because the moment Lu Ping made his move, Qi Lianying's entire attention was drawn to the three figures that appeared in front of her. Qi Lianying asked curiously, "What kind of magic did you use just now? Don't tell me you've been staying here without moving?" Lu Ping pretended to be surprised and said, "Don't you know whether I was by your side or not? This is the deceiving the heavens and crossing the seas magic. When trained to a high level, every figure can be used as a killing move." Qi Lianying did not believe him and said, "You're bragging. If every figure could be used to kill an enemy, wouldn't there be 4 or 5 Lu Tianping ganging up on you before the fight even starts? Who would be a match for you then?" Lu Ping laughed and said, "I didn't say that every figure has my own strength. I just said that I can change between these figures at will and choose different ways to deal with different situations." The two of them flew towards Feiliang Mountain. Lu Ping said in a low voice, "I'm afraid it won't be a peaceful journey. I thought that they would challenge me on Feiliang Mountain in front of all the adepts who came to watch the sword fight, but I didn't expect to be targeted the moment we entered Hushi." Qi Lianying laughed and said, "Isn't this better? There's going to be a lot of fun to watch." Lu Ping was very angry and said, "I'm starting to regret bringing you here, not because the journey is full of danger, but because you're gloating." Qi Lianying, on the other hand, said heartlessly, "I would like to step in and help you, but those who dare to fight with you are all at least late Dharma adepts. You want me, someone who has just passed my first tribulation, to help you deal with this?" Lu Ping was speechless. At this moment, it was impossible for Qi Lianying to leave even if he wanted to. Since someone had already set their eyes on him, Qi Lianying, who had been following him all this while, would naturally be within their line of sight as well. It would be dangerous for Qi Lianying to leave. Sure enough, the two of them hadn't even walked 100 miles before they were blocked by another person. This time, the person who had come did not hide his identity. His late Dharma stage cultivation was openly displayed. It was obvious that he was here to challenge Lu Ping. However, the aura around this person made Lu Ping's expression look a little strange. It was a big demon king with a strong demonic aura. "How should I address you, fellow Taoist?" Lu Ping asked with a smile as he stood several hundred feet away from the other party. The person before him had the back of a tiger and the waist of a bear. He was very muscular and had a pair of large, bell-like eyes that shone with a fierce light. It was obvious that he was someone who was used to killing. However, his face looked a little more simple and honest. It was not as threatening as his eyes. The person said in a low, muffled voice, "I am Hu Lifeng from the Multicolor clan. Everyone says that among the 3 generations, below the pure yang stage, you are the number 1. I am not convinced, so I came all the way from the western wilderness to fight with you." Lu Ping said in surprise, "Now it is a duel between the Ziyang Palace and the sky-splitting Sword Saint. Besides the fact that the western wilderness is a place where the humans gather, if I am not wrong, your race and the Ziyang Palace are enemies. Brother who has come all the way here to challenge me. Aren't you afraid that the people from the Ziyang Palace will find trouble with you?" Hu Liefeng's face revealed a simple and honest smile, but his eyes shone with a bloodthirsty aura. He said, "As long as the pure yang does not attack, who would dare?" Lu Ping was slightly stunned. If Hu Lifeng dared to say something like this, it was obvious that he had absolute confidence in his own abilities. As expected, Hu Lifeng continued, "I once fought with Fan Mingjie, who is ranked 2nd in the Ziyang Palace, in the Western Wilderness. That person only knew how to run around, and the fight was not satisfying. I heard from him that you are the number 1 talent among the younger generation in the human cultivation world, so I came all the way from the Western Wilderness to fight you." Lu Ping raised his eyebrows. He was not worried that Fan Mingjie would bring trouble to him. With Lu Ping's current reputation, he was already famous in the cultivation world. If Hu Lifeng really wanted to challenge him, there was no need for him to hear about Lu Ping's reputation from Fan Mingjie. What he cared about was the result of Hu Liefeng's fight with Fan Mingjie. Although Lu Ping had not personally seen Fan Mingjie's strength, Lu Ping knew the depth of Xie Tianyang's strength. Since Fan Mingjie was able to become the 2nd direct disciple of the Ziyang Palace, his strength could not be underestimated. Although the tiger demon could not do anything to Fan Mingjie, it was obvious that he had the upper hand in the fight. Lu Ping's heart skipped a beat, and he said, "Since you have fought with Fan Mingjie before, I wonder if you have also fought with the first direct disciple of the Ziyang Palace, Yan Nanfei?" Hu Lifeng chuckled and said, "We are not much different. The Ziyang Palace is known as the #1 sword reduction sect of the human race, but their first direct disciple is only SOSO. Lu Ping smiled and asked again, "Your strength is indeed admirable. However, with your strength, what rank do you rank among the cultivators of the same generation in the multicolored tiger clan?" Hu Lifeng suddenly summoned a huge tiger fang saber that was over 10 feet long, and he roared, "Why are you asking so many questions? You human cultivators are always cunning. If you want to know my rank, then fight me first." With that, the huge tiger fang saber had already cut through the void, and it chopped down towards Lu Ping's head. Lu Ping cursed in his heart. This tiger demon looked simple and unruly, but he was actually very shrewd. Lu Ping had just wanted to get some information about the multicolored tiger clan from him, but he did not expect that he would immediately notice and attack Lu Ping. This tiger's fang saber was obviously a spirit treasure as well. Moreover, it should be the tiger demon's natal spirit weapon refined from its own teeth. It was an extremely sharp killing weapon. Lu Ping's expression was solemn. The tiger demon's cultivation might not be as high as the masked cultivators, but the intensity of the battle far surpassed the masked cultivators. If it was a normal battle, this tiger demon might not be as good as the masked cultivator, but if it was a battle of life and death, Lu Ping was more optimistic about this fierce tiger. Hu Lifeng had a life spirit treasure, and so did Lu Ping. Fight! 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 The sword of true spirit transformed into 9 dragons, and they also let out shocking dragon roars in midair, entangling the huge saber light in midair. Bang! 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 A series of loud sounds rang out, and 5 of the 9 dragons in midair were severed. However, the remaining 4 entangled the huge saber tightly, preventing it from descending any further. Good. It was rare for someone to choose to fight him head-on. Hu Liefeng's eyes shone with blood-red light, and his face was filled with joy. The moment his tiger fang saber was blocked by Lu Ping, a huge, patterned whip suddenly fell from his waist. With a shake of his hand, it turned into a huge whip, and with a crisp sound, the other end of the whip was already at Lu Ping's neck. Lu Ping's neck was about to be wrapped around by the tiger tail whip, but Lu Ping smiled at Hu Lifeng, then suddenly opened his mouth and blew at the tiger tail whip. A tiny bolt of lightning suddenly shot out from his mouth, followed by an earth-shattering explosion. The tiger tail whip was immediately struck by the divine Yin water lightning, turning into a straight, patterned rod. Hu Lifeng roared in pain. Clearly, Lu Ping's divine Yin water lightning had not only injured the tiger tail whip, but also Hu Liefeng's right hand, which was controlling the treasure. At this moment, wisps of green smoke were rising from it, and the fragrance of roasted meat wafted from his hand. However, Hu Lifeng was really brave. He ignored the pain and numbness of his hand after being struck by the divine Yin water lightning, and directly smashed the tiger tail whip, which had turned into a patterned rod, towards Lu Ping. Lu Ping wanted to cut off the tiger's tail with a pair of scissors, but he didn't want to become a sworn enemy of the tiger. So, he suddenly reached out and grabbed the tiger's tail staff. Then, he actually began to compete with the tiger's tail staff through the air. This greatly exceeded Hu Liefeng's expectations, but Hu Lifeng was overjoyed. In the cultivation world, apart from the direct descendants of Taoist Hu, it seemed that only the direct descendant of Taoist ape, wise giant ape, could compare with them in terms of innate strength. The tiger tail whip was, after all, a soft object, even though it had stiffened after being struck by the divine Yin water lightning, and because Hu Lifeng had taken advantage of the situation to attack Lu Ping. The tiger tail whip had turned back into a tiger tail whip the moment Lu Ping grabbed it. Therefore, the two of them did not push forward, but pulled back. The tiger tail whip immediately became taut in the air. Although Hu Lifeng had absolute confidence in his own strength, his heart was startled when the two of them wrestled. The strength that was transmitted from the tiger tail whip was surprisingly not inferior to his. This person's physical body was so strong. However, at this moment, Hu Lifeng suddenly chuckled and loosened his grip on the tiger tail whip. Although Lu Ping's control of his body was strong enough, he could not help but be pushed back by Hu Liefeng's sudden loosening of the tiger tail whip. While Lu Ping was dodged, Hu Lifeng roared and pounced at him. At the same time, he stretched out his hands and 3-inch-long sharp claws shot out from his claws. The cold glint made Lu Ping believe that once the tiger monster got close to him, his water curtain heavenly flower would be easily torn apart by the tiger monster. Lu Ping's eyes flashed with a cold light, and he knew that once the tiger monster got close to him, his water curtain heavenly flower would be easily torn apart. However, just when Hu Lifeng was certain that he was about to capture the strongest person below pure yang, his waist suddenly tightened. Hu Lifeng cursed inwardly. Just as he was about to struggle, his chest tightened again, causing him to be unable to breathe. Hu Liefeng's claws tore at his chest, as if he wanted to tear apart the thing that was strangling him. Unexpectedly, his hands tightened again. This time, he could clearly see that what was strangling his hands was a flood dragon that Lu Tianping had transformed into with his flying sword. How was this possible? Hu Lifeng raised his head to look, only to see that his Tiger Fong huge saber was actually tightly entangled by the 4 spirit treasure swords in the air. Hu Lifeng suddenly understood that the 5 flood dragons that were restraining him were actually the 5 that he had cut in half. However, hadn't they already been cut in half? At this moment, another flood dragon coiled around Hu Liefeng's legs and neck. He was completely immobilized, and in reality, Hu Lifeng did not dare to move, because the flood dragon around his chest had already sealed his heart space. Let alone resisting, he could not even squeeze a drop of spiritual energy out of his heart space. At this moment, if Lu Ping wanted to take his life, it was all up to him. Chapter 1436. Damn it, although I thought that even if I lost this battle, I would still be in big trouble for you. I didn't expect that I would lose so easily. You are much more powerful than Fan Mingjie and Yin Nanfei. I admire you very much. Hu Lifeng said to Lu Ping while shaking his hands and taking a few deep breaths to make sure that there were no internal injuries left on his body. Lu Ping put away the sword of immortality, and the water dragon that imprisoned Hu Lifeng naturally dissipated. Hearing Hu Liefeng's words, Lu Ping smiled and said, "You are also very powerful. If I hadn't set up a trap in advance and caught you off guard, I'm afraid it wouldn't have been easy to defeat you." Hu Lifeng shook his head. How was it catching him off guard? It was simply that he didn't have time to prepare. Hu Lifeng thought for a moment, then chuckled and said, "When I came here, I heard that there were many people who were not convinced by you, and I was one of them. However, after this battle, I believe that there will be fewer people who want to cause trouble for you, right?" Lu Ping smiled and said, "That's good. I'm also annoyed. If it wasn't for the invitations from 2 sects, I wouldn't have gone to Fei Liang Mountain." After sending Hu Lifeng away, Lu Ping turned to Qi Lianying and said with a smile, "It should be much quieter now." Unexpectedly, not long after Lu Ping said this, another escape light came crashing down from the sky. Before the person came out of the escape light, a voice floated over from the escape light. "Lu Jichuan from Lingyun Valley is here to ask for advice from North Sea Water Sword Immortal." It was not over yet. Even the most infuriated people would get angry, not to mention Lu Ping, who had been provoked again and again. "Damn it, are you done? Do you really think that I don't dare to kill you?" Lu Ping didn't care who the person was. He formed a seal with both hands and pushed towards the escape light. The clouds in the air suddenly surged and gathered towards the seal in front of Lu Ping. In an instant, a 33-meter-tall fog dragon formed around Lu Ping. Then, it bared its fangs and claws and let out a loud roar towards the sky. Then, it opened its huge mouth and swallowed the escape light. The streak of light didn't seem to take the mist dragon seriously, but it also seemed like it couldn't dodge at all, so it was easily swallowed into the mist dragon's stomach. Just when Qi Lianying couldn't figure out what was going on, a cry of pain suddenly came from the fog dragon's stomach. Qi Lianying finally knew what was going on. However, before she could show the joy of victory on her face, she immediately thought of something, and her beautiful smile froze. Lingyun Valley Lu Jichuan? The name was quite familiar. She seemed to have heard Lu Ping mention it before. Lu Ping swung the back of his hands from the front, like he was really shooing away flies. The fog dragon that was playing happily in the air suddenly roared and disintegrated in the air. Then, a naked person fell from the air with a pile of rags floating above his head. Lu Ping felt relieved and scolded. Do you really think that I'm a pushover? If anyone else comes, I don't mind killing them to show my power. Qi Lianying was really annoyed when she saw Lu Ping. She hurriedly said, calm down, calm down. But who is this Lu Jichuan from Lingyun Valley? Lu Jichuan? Lu Ping seemed to suddenly think of something. He quickly looked down, but the figure of the person who just fell was nowhere to be seen. A gloomy expression flashed across his face, but he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They've become sworn enemies this time. Why didn't you warn me? Even Lu Ping couldn't help but complain to his confidant. Qi Lianying immediately said angrily, You've been yelling about killing as soon as you came up. That person couldn't even take one move from you. It's too late for me to warn you. Lu Ping said dejectedly, he couldn't even take one move from me. This number one disciple of Lingyun Valley is too useless. What? Qi Lianying's almond-shaped eyes were wide open. At the peak of Failiang Mountain, other than a few old men with white hair, there was also a group of young cultivators gathered together. They were all third-generation cultivators that Lao Zu had invited to watch the battle. Many of them were people that Lu Ping was familiar with. B***TCH Nangong, you said that many people will cause trouble for Lu Tianping. Do you know who they are? Those who dared to call the Southern Palace Lord of Skyward Pavilion, Nangong Xiaojian, a B***TCH, had to be at least on par with him in terms of cultivation and status. The person in front of him clearly had that qualification. Nangong Xiaojian glanced at the person who spoke and said, Li Shiqian, don't think that I don't know what Qin Shijun is plotting. Hee, don't worry. With Qin Shijun's hypocrisy, he won't attack Lu Tianping from the start. Of course, in order to preserve his reputation, Qin Shiqian won't attack last either. He'll choose to attack in the middle. Even if he wins, it'll be when Lu Tianping's victories are at their highest, but he'll also be exhausted, giving him an advantage that others won't be able to see. Even if he loses, he'll still have the person in front of him as a stepping stone, so he won't look too bad. Li Shiqian snorted and said, I heard that Dongfeng Yanhong also rushed over from Skyward Pavilion. Isn't his goal the same as our sect's eldest senior brother? The two of them were about to argue when Chao Jianping suddenly said, I heard that Nine Mysteries Tower's Wei Zhen also has a grudge with Lu Tianping. Wei Zhen even injured Lu Tianping before. It's a pity that Nine Mysteries Tower has sealed its doors. Otherwise, another number one disciple from the Six Sacred Grounds would have come looking for trouble with Lu Tianping. What? Wei Zhen injured Lu Tianping before? Then Lu Tianping lost to Wei Zhen? That's unbelievable. Is that true? It can't be, right? That's impossible. The various sects' heirs were in an uproar. Their voices were filled with amazement and disbelief. Chao Jianping curled her lips and said, It's true that he injured Lu Tianping. However, that was a trap set up by the First Element Pavilion Master, 2 Elements Pavilion Master, 3 Talents Pavilion Master, 5 Elements Pavilion Master, and 6 Directions Pavilion Master. Unexpectedly, Lu Tianping broke through the formation set up by the 5 Elements Pavilion Master and even injured 2 of them. In the end, when he saw that he had successfully broken through, Wei Zhen injured him from behind with a second tribulation spiritual treasure and escaped. Everyone was dumbfounded again. Their eyes flickered with disbelief. Only Li Shiqian's face was gloomy. He cursed in a low voice, That brat is really lucky. Why didn't he die there? Now that Jinling had formed an alliance with the Sky Pavilion sect, Sky Moon sect, Carefree sect, and Sky Splitter sect, they annihilated the forces that the Crystal Palace had painstakingly built up in the Middle Earth. Then, they joined forces to confront the Crystal Palace in the East Sea. This shook the entire cultivation world. Now, the Crystal Palace not only had to confront the 5 sects in the East Sea, but they also had to guard against the East Sea Demon Tribe, which was ready to make trouble. They were in a very passive situation. Naturally, they did not have a good impression of Lu Tianping. At this moment, a cultivator's expression suddenly changed. He stretched out his hand, tore through the void, and grabbed a jade slip. He glanced at it and said, "The news has arrived. Someone attacked and was defeated by Lu Tianping." Oh, which sect's cultivator dared to be the first to attack? The heirs of the various sects stared curiously at the jade slip in the cultivator's hand. This cultivator was merely a disciple of a large sect. However, his sect was located in the cultivation world of West River. Due to the geographical advantage, he was naturally well informed. However, now that he was being stared at by the heirs of so many Holy Land sects, the proud expression on his face had long since disappeared. He smiled awkwardly and said, see for yourselves." The jade slip was passed around in everyone's hands. Astonished expressions appeared on everyone's faces. Everyone looked at each other with a trace of confusion on their faces. In the end, Nangong Xiaojian coughed softly and said, "Who is this person? Does anyone know?" Li Shiqian sneered. He even covered his face. Naturally, he doesn't want anyone to know. Even if someone here knows who he is, why would they admit it? Nangong Xiaojian also knew that he had asked a stupid question. However, he was extremely thick-skinned and did not take Li Shiqian's sarcasm to heart. Instead, he turned to Sangyu, who had been silent all this time, and asked, "Brother Sang, you have a close relationship with Lu Tianping. Do you know who he is?" Sangyu laughed and said, "Brother Nangong is usually the most astute. So why are you acting so stupid today? This person is hiding his face, so how would I know? However, this person's cultivation is extremely profound. His earth attribute cultivation has already reached the peak of the late Dharma stage. With such a cultivation level, he is definitely not a nobody. Also, based on his cultivation level, he is clearly not a third-generation disciple of any sect. He should be a second-generation cultivator." Nangong Xiaojian nodded and praised, "Not bad, not bad. That makes a lot of sense. It is precisely because he is a second-generation disciple that it would be dishonorable to win and even more shameful to lose, so he simply wrapped himself up from head to toe. Even though he knew that it would be dishonorable to win or lose, he still chose to fight. The one who spoke was Zhao Jijia, the blue light of Ling Yunguang's 7 rainbow lights. Nangong Xiaojian said matter-of-factly, "So this person must have a grudge against Lu Tianping, which is why he would disregard his status and fight with Lu Tianping. However, for the sake of his sect's reputation, he had no choice but to wrap himself up like a dumpling." With that, everyone's gaze shifted back and forth between Wuxing School and the Taishan sect. Lu Tianping had made many enemies while traveling the Central Plains, but it seemed that only the sects that these people belonged to would disregard their status and send people of such cultivation level to cause trouble for him were the Wuxing School and the Taishan sect. The first direct disciple of the Taishan sect snorted coldly and said, "What, do you think it was the seniors of the Taishan sect who interfered?" The first direct disciple of the Heavenly Moon sect, Chanyu, who had been sitting together with Chao Jianping, suddenly said, "I heard that 2 disciples of the earth element from Wuxing School were defeated by Lu Tianping." Liang Jianfei of the Sky Rend also suddenly chuckled and said, "Not only were they defeated, I heard that 2 Gaoshan and Mu Changsheng were even killed by Lu Tianping." A cold snort sounded and Huo Wuliang said coldly, "What do the 2 of you mean? Are you doubting my Wuxing School?" Liang Jianfei laughed and said, "How would I dare? I'm just speaking the truth. Could it be that your sect's 2 Gaoshan and Mu Changsheng were not killed by Lu Tianping?" Chanyu also smiled and said, "Sister Shui, please don't blame us. We've only heard rumors." The direct disciples of the various sects kept their mouths shut and looked as if they were watching a good show. However, Huo Wuliang controlled his temper this time and snorted coldly without saying anything else. This surprised the direct disciples of the various sections. At this moment, the cultivator who had received the news first was stunned. He grabbed a streak of light and exclaimed, "No way! Qi who was captured alive by Lu Tianping." It was as if he did not even hear Nangong Xiaojian's question. Although the crowd didn't know what had happened, Bei Chengxiu's strength could be ranked in the middle among the crowd. Furthermore, he was the local host, so the direct disciples of the various sects had to give him some face. Seeing him in such a state, How could they not know that something big must have happened? In the end, it was Lao Tzu's disciples who were also watching them from the other side of the mountain peak who couldn't take it anymore. The Sunset Sect's Grand Elder, Tanzhong Lao Tzu, coughed and asked, "Chengxiu, what happened? Why did you lose control of your mind?" When Bei Chengxiu suddenly heard his sect's Lao Tzu's question, he immediately came back to his senses with an ah. He knew that he had lost face in front of the cultivators of the various sections. For a moment, he was even more at a loss and did not know what to do. Tanzhong Lao Tzu was also rather displeased to see his own disciple in such a panic. There was a hint of disappointment in his tone as he said, "Bring me the Fai Hongxin." Bei Chengxiu looked as if he had just woken up from a dream. He hurriedly handed the Fai Hongxin to the sect's Grand Elder with a flushed face. However, at that moment, a few rays of light suddenly descended from outside the Feiliang mountain. A few young cultivators walked out of the light one after another. Senior brother Dongfang, why did you come back? Didn't you fight with Lu Tianping? Why did Qin Shijun from the Crystal Palace also come back? He doesn't look too good. Could it be that they were all defeated by Lu Tianping? *T. How much effort did he put in? Moreover, how could senior brother Qin be defeated? Senior sister Shui, over here. Lu Jichuan from the Lingyun Valley doesn't seem to have returned. What's wrong with these people? Why do they all look like frosted eggplants? The cultivators who returned to the Feiliang Mountain were undoubtedly the direct descendants of various sacred grounds and large sections. They were all famous rising stars in the entire cultivation world. However, after these people landed on the peak of the Feiliang Mountain, all of their expressions were extremely ugly. Some looked gloomy, some looked desolate, some had strange expressions, and some were in disbelief. In short, not a single one of them was calm. What? How is this possible? An exclamation came from afar. It was the Grand Elder of the Sunset Sect who had taken the Fai Hongxin letter from Bei Chengxiu. Even though this Lao Tzu had thousands of years of self-restraint, he could not maintain his composure at this moment and could not help but exclaim, "Fellow Tinchong, why are you so flustered?" Chi Fan Lao Tzu's heart skipped a beat as he asked. The Grand Elder of the Sunset Sect smiled bitterly as he handed the Fai Hongxin letter to Chi Fan Lao Tzu. Chi Fan Lao Tzu took a look at the contents in his heart and replied with an "oh." Then, he discreetly glanced at the Lingyun Valley's pure young Lao Tzu, then quietly handed the Fai Hongxin letter to Full Moon Lao Tzu. When Nangong Shaojian and the other third-generation disciples saw that the Lao Tzu from the various sects already knew what had happened, they hurriedly pulled their grand senior brother Dongfang Yanhong over and said, "Senior brother Dongfang, didn't you say that you were going to spar with Lu Tianping? Why have you returned now? Could it be that?" Dongfang Yanhong smiled bitterly. He glanced at the people who had returned to Feiliang Mountain and said to Qin Shijun, "Brother Qin, why don't you explain it to me?" Qin Shijun also revealed a rare look of embarrassment. He looked at the second direct disciple of the Lingyun Valley, Zhao Jijia, and said, "Brother Dongfang has given me a difficult problem. However, everyone will know about this sooner or later. Yes, it's that Lu Tianping defeated fellow Lu from the Lingyun Valley. We felt that we had overestimated ourselves, so we returned first." Everyone looked at Zhao Jijia in the crowd. Those who were quick-witted didn't forget to glance at Pei Chengxiu. They saw that Pei Chengxiu was also looking at Zhao Jijia with a strange expression. They knew that Pei Chengxiu's loss of composure was probably related to Lu Jichuan. When Zhao Jijia heard that the first direct disciple of his sect had been defeated by Lu Tianping, a look of disappointment appeared on his face. However, he still forced a smile and said, "Why? Should everyone be so surprised that senior brother Lu was defeated by Lu Tianping? After all, Lu Tianping is someone who can even repel a heavenly demon. Even if senior brother Lu was defeated by him, everyone shouldn't be so surprised, right?" Dongfang Yanhong, Qin Shijun, and the others laughed dryly and said, "That's right, that's right, that's right." Right at this moment, a furious voice suddenly rang out from where the old ancestors of the various sects were gathered. "How dare you!" Everyone looked over and saw the pure young Lao Tzu disciple of the Lingyun Valley suddenly stand up. His face was full of anger as he said, "How dare that North Sea disciple bully my Lingyun Valley? The old man will definitely grind his bones to dust. The direct disciples of the various sects were shocked. Only Qin Shijun, Shui Jiro, Dongfang Yanhong, and the others seemed to have expected this and didn't find it strange at all. Seeing that the Laozu disciples of the various sects were trying to persuade them, the Lingyun Valley direct disciple Zhao Jijie said coldly, "Fellow Taoist Qin, fellow Shui, fellow Taoist Dongfang, how exactly did my eldest senior brother lose to Lu Tianping? Please tell me." The three of them looked at each other, and in the end, Shui Jiro said, "Fellow Taoist Lu challenged Lu Tianping to learn from him, but he was defeated by Lu Tianping in one move." "What? That's impossible." Without waiting for Zhao Jijie to act, the several proud direct disciples of the various sects couldn't sit still anymore. They jumped up and subconsciously shouted. Qin Shijun's face darkened, and he said, "Are you all suspecting that we're lying?" The status of the cultivators who stood up naturally couldn't be compared to the number one direct disciples of the Holy Lands. Hearing that, their expressions changed, and they sat back down unwillingly. Dongfang Yanhong also said with a bitter smile, "I know you all don't believe me, but that's the truth. After hearing the news of fellow Taoist Lu's defeat, we thought that our strength was about the same as fellow Taoist Lu's. In order to avoid humiliating ourselves, we could only retreat." A dignified number one direct disciple of a holy land couldn't even take one move from a cultivator of the same realm. No wonder the direct disciples of the various holy lands and large sects who tried to challenge Lu Tianping all returned with their tails between their legs. It was also no wonder that Pei Chengxiu had lost her composure. Although it was embarrassing, there was no need for the Lingyun Valley's pure young Laozu to be so angry. No matter how narrow-minded this Laozu was, he was still inferior to Lu Tianping in the end. Why did he have to lose his temper on the spot and suddenly become a laughing stock? Nangong Xiaojian's mind spun quickly. He concluded that there must be some hidden story behind this, so he looked at Pei Chengxiu again. Unexpectedly, when Pei Chengxiu saw his gaze, she subconsciously avoided it. Nangong Xiaojian chuckled and said, "Fellow Taoist Pei, is there some hidden story behind this that we don't know?" This fellow was as cunning as a ghost. He had seen through the clues but did not ask Dongfang Hongyin, Qin Shijun, or the other direct disciples of the Holy Lands who had seen it with their own eyes. Instead, he asked Pei Chengxiu, a soft persimmon. Naturally, it was because his skyward pavilion was not afraid of offending the Sunset Sect. Pei Chengxiu stammered, "What hidden story? Haven't the brothers from the Holy Lands already told us?" "Is that so?" Nangong Xiaojian smiled sinisterly. Just as he was about to continue asking, he heard a loud roar from afar. The Lingyun Valley's pure young Laozu, Chang Shengzi, stood up with his palms facing the sky. He said, "Lu Tianping, you dare to bully my Lingyun Valley? Let the old man have a taste of you." Everyone was taken aback. That Lu Tianping had already arrived? The wind and clouds surged on the peak of Failing Mountain. As Chang Shengzi pushed out his palms, the clouds that shrouded the peak immediately transformed into a giant cloud wand. The cloud wand let out a long cry, flapped its wings, and extended its claws, grabbing at two black dots in the distance. Chapter 1438. The Lingyun Valley's pure young Laozu Chang Shengzi's sudden attack had shocked the heirs of the various sections. This was because they could not detect anyone approaching the peak of the Feiliang Mountain with their divine consciousness. What was wrong with Chang Shengzi? Or did Lu Tianping use some mystical technique to hide himself and approach the Feiliang Mountain without being detected by these pure young Laozu cultivators? Right at this moment, Dongfang Yanhong said abruptly, "This is probably a spatial battle between pure young cultivators, right?" Everyone was stunned. The so-called battle between pure young cultivators was also known as the Battle of the Void. It was a battle between pure young Laozu cultivators that relied on the power of space to cast spells within the range of their divine consciousness. It was much more powerful than the spells that a middle and late Dharma adept could cast. Qin Shijun also sighed and said, "Chang Shengzi Laozu's attack is at least 100 miles away. I wonder how Lu Tianping is going to deal with it." As soon as he finished speaking, a mournful wail was heard in midair. Although the heirs did not know what was happening 100 miles away, They could tell from Chang Shengzi's ugly expression that Chang Shengzi's attack probably did not gain any advantage over Lu Tianping. Right at this moment, an enormous sound wave surged over from afar, and it said, "It's impolite not to reciprocate. Please receive a move from me as well." Everyone looked up and saw that the sound wave had caused the space around it to tremble. Then, a strange serpent suddenly rushed out of the space and roared at the sky. Then, it wriggled its body in the air and charged toward Chang Shengzi. Chang Shengzi had a look of disdain on his face. He snorted coldly and stretched out a finger as he shouted, "Destroy!" As the giant flood dragon was charging towards Chang Shengzi, it was annihilated from head to tail after the word annihilate was uttered. Although everyone was a little disappointed with Lu Ping's power, the flood dragon was destroyed by Chang Shengzi's power from the beginning to the end. However, the impact of the flood dragon was great. Everyone thought that the flood dragon would not be able to get close to Chang Shengzi before it was destroyed. Chang Shengzi seemed to have expected this, and it was inevitable for him to underestimate the flood dragon. At this moment, the incomplete body of the flood dragon had already reached a distance of 100 feet from Chang Shengzi. Chang Shengzi did not take it to heart as he was confident of the power of his supernatural power. At the same time, he wanted to display the arrogance of the Lingyun Valley in front of everyone. The incomplete body of the Jiao Dragon was finally destroyed on the peak of Fei Liang Mountain. Chang Shengzi sneered and said, "So this is all the North Sea Water Sword Celestial can do. Is that so?" Hee. Lu Ping's voice suddenly rang from the peak of Fei Liang Mountain. It seemed like he was not far away from the peak. Chang Shengzi's heart skipped a beat when he heard the mockery in Lu Ping's tone. Although he was extremely unwilling, he could not help but use his divine sense to scan the area in front of him. He exclaimed in shock, and his expression changed drastically as he retreated. Everyone did not know what was going on and could only use their divine senses to scan the void in front of Chang Shengzi. However, they all felt an aura that could melt their divine senses. Everyone was shocked and quickly retracted their divine senses. At this moment, a huge, faintly discernible pearl suddenly appeared in the mist formed after the collapse of the flood dragon. With a pop, the pearl was shattered by the power of Chang Shengzi's annihilation finger. It then turned into water droplets and strangely flew towards Chang Shengzi's direction. Chang Shengzi acted as if he was facing a formidable enemy. He formed a seal with both hands and shouted, "Seal!" An invisible barrier formed around his body, which then blocked the falling water droplets. Every water droplet that landed on the invisible barrier would form a deep hole. Chang Shengzi's face was not looking good. If he did not notice it earlier, these water droplets might not be able to harm his pure young body, but his clothes would be riddled with holes. However, this was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that he was already at a disadvantage in the battle with Lu Ping. Between the two of them, Chang Shengzi was the first to attack, but Lu Ping easily resolved it. However, Lu Ping's counterattack forced Chang Shengzi to attack twice. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Chang Shengzi had already lost a move. However, just as Chang Shengzi's thoughts were drifting, his divine senses suddenly captured that 3 of the water droplets landed on the same spot on the invisible barrier. Chang Shengzi knew that something was wrong. He activated the vital energy in his body to strengthen the barrier, but it was too late. The 3 water droplets had already pierced through the invisible barrier, and the 4th water droplet passed through the hole and landed on Chang Shengzi's body. In a hurry, Chang Shengzi could only dodge sideways, but the water droplet had pierced a small hole through his clothes. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. However, which one of the cultivators present was not an existence comparable to the MT Tai and Big Dipper in the present world of cultivation? Even the heir disciples from the various sects would become the future MT Tai and Big Dipper. Thus, it was only natural for them to be able to clearly see what was happening on the stage. Chang Shengzi's expression changed several times, but he finally stopped in anger. Of course, the crowd would not mock a pure yang, but their perception of the danger of Lu Tianping had risen to a new level. When Lu Ping landed on the peak of Fei Liang Mountain with Qi Lianying, 7 Fan Laozu and Full Moon Laozu were the first to welcome them. This made Lu Ping feel extremely flattered. Although these two were pure yang like the Lao Tzu of the various sects, they were able to support a sect on their own. This made their status among the pure yang cultivators in the cultivation world extremely high. In most cases, the cultivation world relied on one's strength. This strength sometimes did not refer to the forces behind one's back, but also to one's personal strength. Seven Fan Laozu and Full Moon Laozu's status were not inferior to the pure yang cultivators of the various sections. Especially Seven Fan Laozu, his status was even higher than those pure yang cultivators of the various sections. There was even a rumor that Seven Fan Laozu's real strength could be ranked second among the pure yang humans, only inferior to the sky-splitting sword sage Xiao Baiyu. In this case, the two of them had given Lu Ping enough face by coming together to welcome him. However, now that the five sects had formed an alliance and they had a common enemy, the Crystal Palace, the five sects must be closely united. It was understandable that the two pure yang cultivators deliberately came to welcome Lu Tianping in this way. Even so, when they thought of the strength that Lu Tianping had shown before, the pure yang cultivators of various sects subconsciously restrained their arrogance. This was also the respect that should be given to the strong. The two Laozu introduced Lu Ping to the Laozu cultivators of various sects who came to watch the battle. At the same time, they also introduced the Laozu cultivators of various sects to Lu Ping. Although the various Laozu cultivators of various sects were uncomfortable in their hearts, most of the Laozu cultivators of various sects from the Seven Fan Laozu and Lu Ping's real strength had come to greet them with a smile. This time, apart from the pure yang cultivators from the five sacred lands, the Laozu cultivators from various sects who came to watch the battle were invited by Purple Sun Palace and Skyrend. In addition, there were also Seven Fan Laozu, Full Moon Laozu, Feng Lu Laozu, Sanshan Laozu, and other acquaintances. In addition, there were also two pure yang cultivators who came from two large sects in the cultivation world of Central Region, Laozu cultivators. In addition to the 11 pure yang cultivators present, there were also great cultivators from various famous sects in the cultivation world of Central Region and the overseas region who were invited. Although Lu Ping was treated with great courtesy, he placed himself in an extremely low position. If it was a duel, Lu Ping would naturally fight to win. However, now that they were just acquaintances, Lu Ping naturally would not be so arrogant as to make enemies everywhere. During the process of the Seven Fan Laozu and Lu Ping's introductions, Lu Ping's expression was humble. He greeted all the Laozu cultivators of various sects as juniors. This more or less made the cultivators of various sects who were afraid of his strength feel much better. This included the eldest son of the Lingyun Valley, Laozu. Although he still hated Lu Ping to the core, he would not undermine him at this time. That would only make the various sects look down on the Lingyun Valley even more. In response to Lu Ping's superficial apology, his expression was indifferent. He only asked, "The divine sense that Lu Daoyu used previously was rather unique, especially the water-nurturing pearl in the cloud dragon's stomach, which was even more powerful. Even Laozu's space protection could be penetrated. However, can you tell me about the natal spiritual water that Lu Daoyu cultivated?" Lu Ping answered with a smile, "This is not a secret. Senior Chang Shengzi has a keen eye. This is indeed the natal spiritual water that I cultivated. Let's call it the Triple Brilliance Sacred Water." The Triple Brilliance Sacred Water. All the Laozu cultivators of various sects silently memorized this name. Not only did they have to remember it, but they would also warn the cultivators of their sects when they returned to their sects so that they would remember this natal spiritual water of the North, Sea Water Sword Immortal. It was a unique natal spiritual water that could easily penetrate a pure yang cultivator's space protection divine sense. Triple Brilliance Sacred Water. Chang Shengzi mumbled to himself, "What a triple brilliance sacred water." Hee, Lu Daoyu is in the limelight this time. All the cultivators of various sects have failed to advance in your hands. The first direct disciple of a sacred ground was defeated by you in just one move. From today onwards, Lu Daoyu's reputation in the cultivation world will probably go up another level. Although Lu Ping's strength was enough to make the Laozu cultivators of various sects fear him, and he also had the support of Seven Fan Laozu and Full Moon Laozu. However, this did not mean that there were no people who could undermine him. A sinister laughter was heard in Lu Ping's ears. The words of the pure yang cultivator of Wuxing School, Laozu Water Spirit Master, not only enraged 7 Fan Laozu, but also Chang Shengzi. Lu Ping and Wuxing School could be considered as a blood feud. He had killed 3 of the 5 elemental Juzi, and 2 of the earth elemental Juzi had died in his hands. Although Lu Ping was angry in his heart, he still looked calm. He turned around and smiled at Water Spirit Master. Senior Water Spirit Master is right. Although I managed to defeat Lu Daoyu from Lingyun Valley by luck, it is not a big deal. What I am really proud of is that I managed to scare your sect's fire elemental Juzi, so much that he did not dare to attack and ran away in panic. Water Spirit Master's expression stiffened, and his face suddenly became gloomy. Because Lu Ping had sent Lu Jichuan flying, Hu Wuliang had indeed thought that he could not defeat Lu Ping, so he retreated back to Feiliang Mountain. However, to say that he was scared by Lu Ping and did not dare to fight, although Lu Ping was exaggerating, it was still something that Water Spirit Master could not refute. In fact, Hu Wuliang was not the only one who retreated back to Feiliang Mountain because he knew that he could not defeat Lu Ping. However, Lu Ping only focused on Hu Wuliang, acting as if he only saw Hu Wuliang and did not see anyone else. Water Spirit Master could not argue that there were others, because doing so would be no different from offending all the cultivators of the sections. However, although Water Spirit Master was angry, he did not say anything. Hu Wuliang, who was standing at the side, could not let this go. Otherwise, he would not be able to raise his head in the cultivation world in the future. Even if he knew that he was not a match for Lu Ping, he had to jump out and fight this battle. Lu Tianping, you have gone too far. I am Hu Wuliang from Wuxing School. Do you dare to fight? Lu Ping glanced at him with a faint smile. Hu Wuliang's heart suddenly jumped, but he had to bite the bullet and stand there with an angry expression on his face. Without waiting for Lu Ping to reply, Qin Shijun had already walked out and advised, Fellow Hua, why are you so angry? We are currently on Feiliang Mountain, and the seniors and fellow Taoists of the various sects are all here, waiting for the second sword battle between Purple Sun Palace and Skyrend. If the 2 of you fight here, won't you be a noisy guest and usurp the host? Hu Wuliang naturally did not have the courage to fight Lu Ping. However, the situation dictated that he could not lose face in front of Laozu and his peers. Now that someone was advising him, Hu Wuliang naturally had to take advantage of the situation. On the contrary, Nangong Xiaojian sneered in a low voice, Great Gentleman Qin is really considerate. Everyone naturally heard this. Hu Wuliang's face turned red, but he could only pretend that he did not hear it. Qin Shijun's expression was the same as usual. Dongfang Yanhong glared at Nangong Xiaojian from the side. Nangong Xiaojian chuckled and shut his mouth in the end. Haha, Lu Daoyu is a young hero. In front of you, we are all old and useless. Although the last pure young Laozu's words were full of praise, Lu Ping did not dare to believe that this old fellow had good intentions. He only smiled and said, Senior Yuan Zhan is too polite. I was rash and would not dare to compare myself to the seniors. I was just opportunistic. The old fellow in front of him was a pure young Laozu from the Crystal Palace. His name was Yuan Zhan, and he was also a first-generation pure yang cultivator. There were already 4 pure young Laozu from the Crystal Palace that Lu Ping had seen before. 2 of them had fallen at the hands of Xiao Baiyu and Full Moon Laozu. If it had been the 5-element sect, the deaths of 2 pure yang experts would already be enough to deal a heavy blow to the 5-element sect, causing their reputation to plummet greatly in the cultivation world of the Central Plains. However, this did not seem to affect Water Crystal Palace much at all. It was said that the cultivation world was known as the 2 palaces. Purple Sun Palace and Crystal Palace each had more than 5 pure yang cultivators. Lu Ping had even received news from Skyrend and Carefree Pavilion that at least 2 of the second-generation cultivators from the Crystal Palace had passed the 3rd Thunder Tribulation and become pure yang. In this case, even though the expansion of the Crystal Palace's influence had been hindered, their strength had not suffered too much. However, thinking about this, it seemed to be understandable. In fact, in the cultivation world, there had already been second-generation cultivators who had advanced to the pure yang realm. The first one was Xiao Baiyu. Eighth Sister Zhu of the Nine Mysteries Tower was also a second-generation cultivator. It was not surprising that there were second-generation disciples of the Crystal Palace and the Purple Sun Palace who had begun to advance to the Pure Yang realm. Especially after the opening of the Seventh Patriarch's Taoist altar, most of the late Dharma adepts on the list were second-generation cultivators from various sections. After the trip to the Seventh Patriarch's Taoist altar, these people's strength had increased. Many of them had already advanced to the peak of the late Dharma adepts and were only one step away from advancing to Pure Yang. It seemed that the cultivation world was about to usher in the peak period of the second-generation cultivators advancing to Pure Yang. It was not easy for Lu Ping to go through the motions of the various sects Laozu. Although he was very impatient, he had no choice. After the matter was settled, Lu Ping hurriedly excused himself and headed towards the place where the disciples of the various sects had gathered. Lu Ping's arrival caused the various sects cultivators to become slightly cautious. Now that Lu Ping's status was clearly not comparable to that of an ordinary third-generation disciple, Sang Yu, Chao Jianpain, and the others were on friendly terms with Lu Ping. Chan Yu, Sky Rind, Liang Jianfei, and the other cultivators of the Tianyue sect were also closer to Lu Ping because of the Five Sects Alliance. Naturally, the few of them gathered together in a small circle. Not long after, a person also sneaked in. It was Nangong Xiaojian from Skyward Pavilion. Nangong Xiaojian chuckled when he saw Lu Ping looking at him. "Lu Daoyu, we meet again." Lu Ping smiled. "So it's Brother Nangong. It has indeed been a long time since we last met in the land of the two rivers. I still have to thank Brother Nangong for your warning before I entered the Seventh Patriarch's Dao altar." An awkward look flashed across Nangong Xiaojian's face, but he immediately said, "You're too kind. Lu Daoyu's strength is tyrannical. It was unnecessary for me to do so." Lu Ping sternly said, "No matter what, Brother Nangong's warning was not wrong. I did indeed encounter quite a bit of trouble in the Dao altar. If it wasn't for Brother Nangong's warning, I would have fallen into someone else's trap long ago." Sang Yu saw that Nangong Xiaojian seemed to have something to say, so she asked with a smile, "Nangong, do you have something to say?" Nangong Xiaojian coughed and chuckled. However, his expression still carried a trace of solemnity as he asked Lu Ping, "Lu Daoyu, who do you think will emerge victorious in the duel between the 6 heirs of the Purple Sun Palace and the Sky-Splitting Sword Saint?" Lu Ping looked at Nangong Xiaojian in surprise. Only then did he notice that when Nangong Xiaojian asked him the question, quite a few people seemed to be paying attention to him, as if they wanted to hear his thoughts. Lu Ping did not know why Nangong Xiaojian would ask him this question, but it seemed like this was a question that many people were interested in. Thus, he smiled and said, "I can't say for sure. The Sky-Splitting Sword Saint is the #1 Pure Yang expert in the world. If the 6 heirs of the Purple Sun Palace dared to fight him, they naturally must have something up their sleeves. Let's wait and see." A cold voice said, "I originally thought that the North Sea Water Sword Immortal must have something extraordinary about him to be invited by the Purple Sun Palace and the Sky-Splitting Sword Saint as a witness. Now that I've seen him, it seems like he's only a..." Lu Ping's gaze swept over the speaker, but it was an unfamiliar face. Nangong Xiaojian saw the doubt on Lu Ping's face and introduced, "This is the second of the Lingyun Valley's 7 rainbow lights, Blue Light Zhao Jijia." Lu Ping suddenly realized that the Lingyun Valley had been greatly humiliated by Lu Ping because of Lu Jichuan. It was no wonder they were targeting him. However, Lu Ping's current mentality was no longer the same as before, especially after greeting the Pure Yang and Grand Cultivators of the various sections. When he looked at the third-generation heirs of the various sects again, apart from his good friends like Sang Yu, he could not help but look down on them. They merely laughed at Zhao Jijia's mockery. At that moment, Lu Ping saw that Nangong Xiaojian seemed to be hesitating to speak. Lu Ping felt strange, but he heard Nangong Xiaojian's voice transmission. "Brother Lu, you must be careful after this sword battle. It seems like someone wants to deal with you." Lu Ping smiled and did not take it to heart. Nangong Xiaojian exchanged a few words with the crowd before finding an excuse to leave. Chapter 1439. Lu Ping did not take Nangong Xiaojian's warning to heart. Given Lu Ping's current status in the cultivation world, How many people wanted to deal with him? Wanting to deal with him was one thing, but being able to do so was another. Looking at the several pure young Laozu on the peak of Failiang Mountain, they had stepped on countless corpses, experienced countless battles, and sowed countless grudges in order to get to where they were today. Who knew how many people in the cultivation world wanted to deal with them in the open or in the dark, but had they ever felt the slightest bit of fear? Seeing that Lu Ping only politely nodded in thanks to his warning, and clearly did not take it to heart, Nangong Xiaojian looked embarrassed and left after exchanging a few words with the others. The moment Nangong Xiaojian turned to leave, Lu Ping's gaze inadvertently swept over his back. His eyes narrowed and a solemn expression flashed across his face. Just as Lu Ping was about to ponder, he suddenly looked up at the peak of Failiang Mountain. Then, Lu Ping grabbed Qi Lianying's wrist and took a step forward. The two of them disappeared. Chao Jianpain and the others who were beside Lu Ping were stunned. Then, they heard Nangong Xiaojian exclaim, "Ah, the Laozu have all disappeared." Dongfang Yanhong said in a low voice, "The duel between the two sects has already begun." Qin Shijun also said, "Everyone, don't panic. The Laozu from the various sects who have left must have received prior notice from the two sections. There are also many late Dharma adepts among them. I think we should be able to find the real location of the duel." As soon as Qin Shijun finished speaking, Chao Jianpain, Liang Jianfei, Chan Yu, Sang Yu, and the others had already risen into the air and disappeared into the sea of clouds that had slowly gathered at the peak of Failiang Mountain. Dongfang Yanhong's expression changed. He looked up and said, "Let's go too." After saying that, he rose into the air and chased after Chao Jianpain and the others. However, before all the heirs, including Chao Jianpain's group, could get close to the sea of clouds in midair, the space above everyone's heads suddenly changed. An eerie barrier of sword chi appeared in front of the heirs, forcing them to stop. Using the sword light to open up the void, the space behind the sword chi barrier should be where the 6 swords of the Purple Sun Palace and the sky-splitting sword sage were fighting. Both sides had reached the level of pure yang, so they naturally could not really fight on Mount Failiang. They could only temporarily open up the void as a place for the battle. However, if they wanted to watch the battle, they had to first break through the sword light barrier. Chao Jianpain was the first to strike. Her sword sliced through the barrier, and a series of clashing sounds of sword chi could be heard. The sword light was only able to cut through 3 feet before disappearing. Heavenly Moon Sect's Chan Yu smiled and said, "I'll lend Sister Chao a hand." With the first heirs of the two sects working together, the sword light barrier was quickly torn apart. The two of them stepped into the barrier one after another. Sang Yu laughed bitterly and said to Liang Jianfei, "Brother Liang, looks like you and I will have to work together. We can't just follow behind them and take advantage of them." Liang Jianfei felt the same way and said, "Let's just open up another passage. It'll be easy for us to work together." Liang Jianfei's swordsmanship was inherited from Xiao Baiyu, so he had the title of Little Sword Sage in Skyrend. His sword light was naturally sharp. After breaking the barrier with one strike, Sang Yu let out a low cry and pulled at the void with her hands. The hole in the barrier that had been broken was immediately torn apart and enlarged. Liang Jianfei sighed in admiration as the two of them entered the sword light barrier one after another. At this time, the heirs of the various sects had already started to follow suit. Qin Shijun and Li Shiqian worked together, while Dongfang Yanhong and Nangong Xiaojian worked together. It was not difficult for them to break through the sword light barrier. The cultivators from the various sects who came later were unable to join forces with others, or were simply unable to do so. They could only shamelessly follow behind those who could break through the sword light barrier and take advantage of the situation. However, just as everyone broke through the sword light barrier and entered the battle space, an even larger storm of sword light immediately followed. The continuous sword chimes almost caused the heirs of the various sects to go deaf. The heirs of the various sects cried out in alarm and tried to resist, but even though they were at the edge of the battle space, the sword light and sword chi that scattered over still caused them to suffer greatly. After much difficulty, the cultivators from the various sects managed to evade wave after wave of sword light. Only after sticking close to the sword light barrier did they realize that the sword light that was randomly scattering out from the dual dimension would pour into the barrier when approaching it. Once again, the barrier stabilized the dual dimension that was sealed by the sword light barrier. This time, the heirs of the various sects finally calmed down and noticed that the battle between the 6 swords of Ziyang Palace and Xiao Baiyu had already begun. The pure yang and great cultivators from the various sects who were invited to watch the battle were currently hovering in the air at the edge of the battle space, observing the sword battle in the space. If there were cultivators who were proficient in spatial abilities or formation Dao present, they would be able to see that the huge barrier formed by sword light in the void above Faelyang Mountain was actually maintained by these pure yang and great cultivators from the various sects working together. Lu Ping was also one of the people maintaining this sword light space. However, in order to avoid trouble, under the watchful eyes of the various Laozu from the various sects, he used his official position for his own personal gain. He drew out several sword lights and connected them to the sword light barrier, using the power of the sword light barrier to form a sword light curtain in front of him and Qi Lianying. This way, they would not have to expend effort to block the scattered sword qi from the battle, and at the same time, they would not be obstructed from watching the battle between Xiao Baiyu and the 6 swords of Ziyang Palace in the space. What made the various Laozu from the various sects even more speechless was that this guy had done this just to give his lover a safe place to watch the sword battle. After all, the cultivators from the various sects who had come to watch the battle were at least great cultivators. Only Qi Lianying, who was a mid-Dharma adept, would be a burden. With Lu Ping's current status and strength, even if he did this, the various Laozu from the various sects would not be able to say anything. After all, the sword light curtain was also Lu Ping's true ability. However, this guy was watching the sword battle in the field while enjoying tea with his lover behind the space he had created. It was a sword battle that would shock the entire cultivation world. As for the heirs of the various sects, they had to break through the sword light barrier themselves to be qualified to watch the sword battle. This was also a test that the various Laozu from the various sects had set for their disciples. If they could not even break through the sword light barrier, then there was naturally no point in watching the sword battle. How is it? Did you see anything? Lu Ping asked Qi Lianying, who was watching the sword battle intently. Qi Lianying, on the other hand, wasn't as relaxed as Lu Ping. The sword battle between the two was obviously a battle between the top sword cultivators in the cultivation world. Even for a mid-avatar cultivator like Qi Lianying, it was still difficult for him to comprehend the intricacies of the battle. Qi Lianying answered hesitantly, "The sword battle between the two seems intense. The coordination of the 6 swords of the Ziyang Palace is as smooth as flowing water. The sky-splitting sword saint is also handling it with ease. However, it seems that both sides are still holding back and have yet to bring out their true abilities." Lu Ping nodded and smiled. "That's right. Both sides are testing each other. It seems that both sides are extremely cautious. It will be extremely difficult to determine the winner of this battle in a short period of time." Qi Lianying continued, "The coordination of the 6 swords of the Ziyang Palace is extremely strange. It seems that the 6 swords are a set of joint attacks, but there are some differences between them." Lu Ping said, "This is probably why the Ziyang Palace has the confidence to use the 6 heirs to fight against the sky-splitting sword saint. Each of the 6 heirs has trained in an unparalleled sword technique. Yin Nanfei and Fan Mingjie swordsmanship can form a set of joint attacks. Similarly, Su Jin and Guo Wanqing swordsmanship can also form a set of joint attacks. Tian Boyang and Xie Tianyang swordsmanship can also form a set of joint attacks. In this way, the 6 heirs of the Ziyang Palace are actually using 3 sets of joint attacks to fight against Xiao Baiyu. But the 3 sets of joint attack swordsmanship of Ziyang Palace can be combined into one, and the 3 sets of joint attack swordsmanship can form a complete sword formation at any time. This is the foundation for the 6 heirs to challenge Xiao Baiyu. This is Xiao Baiyu. If he is replaced by other pure yang practitioners, he will only be defeated by such a strict sword formation formed by the combination of the 6 supreme swordsmanship and the combination of the 6 supreme swordsmanships. At the same time, among the 6 great heirs, Su Jin seems to have just advanced to the late Dharma stage, and the aura around him is extremely unstable. Guo Wanqing and Tian Boyang are still mid-Dharma adepts. If Sujin had stabilized his level of training, and the two of them had passed their second thunder tribulations, Xiao Baiyu would have admitted defeat before the battle even started. Qi Lianying giggled and said, "After all this talk, isn't it because you yourself can't tell who will win this battle?" Lu Ping could not help but laugh and said, "That's true. Only then will this battle be worth watching. If the winner is decided right from the start, wouldn't this sword battle that has shaken the entire world of cultivators become a joke?" Qi Lianying was a little disgruntled as he asked, "Are there no other factors? Purple Sun Palace is one of the 6 great holy lands after all. Who knows how many trump cards they have accumulated since the beginning of the world? If they were to suddenly use them when the two sides are in a stalemate, they might be able to catch Xiao Baiyu off guard." Lu Ping thought about how Xiao Baiyu's natal flying sword was already a pure yang spirit treasure, and now, during the sword battle, he did not know what secret technique Xiao Baiyu had used to conceal it, but the natal flying sword in his hand was still a second tribulation spirit treasure. The 6 great heirs may have trump cards, but that Xiao Baiyu might not have no trump cards either. Don't forget that Xiao Baiyu is also someone who has inherited the sword technique of opening the heavens. Xiao Baiyu was able to obtain the title of the first pure yang practitioner without anyone doubting his abilities. This in itself shows how extraordinary he is. What's more, Xiao Baiyu's swordsmanship cultivation follows the path of Jiao Doran's one sword to break all techniques. What he wants is an indomitable momentum regardless of the opponent's strength. Even if the 6 great heirs want to defeat Xiao Baiyu, they will have to pay a heavy price. In the end, it will only be a situation where both sides suffer. Just as Lu Ping was commenting on the process of the sword battle and giving Qi Lianying pointers, the heirs of the various sects were also struggling to resist and dodge the sword qi scattered from the sword battle. They came to the side of their elders, Laozu, and received pointers from their respective sects' elders. Chapter 1440. Skyrind and Purple Sun Palace were originally of the same origin. As Skyrind's most accomplished swordsman for over 10,000 years, Xiao Baiyu was naturally no stranger to Purple Sun Palace's swordsmanship heritage. In fact, back then, Skyrind's founder, Laozu, was the pure yang sword immortal with the highest achievements in swordsmanship in Purple Sun Palace. At the same time, he was also the most popular pure yang cultivator to enter the minor Kiliacosm, Purple Sun Grotto Heaven. Entering the Purple Yang Grotto Heaven meant that the heaven-splitting patriarch would be able to receive the true spirit's inheritance and control the Purple Yang Palace's true spirit's inheritance that would never be broken in the cultivation world. He would become one of the true controllers of this world. However, when Purple Sun Palace's previous true spirit, Laozu, reached the end of his lifespan and had to leave this world, the person who ultimately chose to inherit the position of Pure Yang was another Pure Yang cultivator who was far inferior to Sky Splitter Laozu in terms of cultivation, strength, and popularity. From Sky Splitter Laozu's point of view, the only reason he was not chosen was that this Pure Yang cultivator was the previous true spirit, Laozu's direct disciple, and was somewhat related to the previous true spirit, Laozu. Sky Splitter Laozu was ambitious and was naturally unwilling to accept such a failure. However, Purple Sun Palace could only send one true spirit, Laozu, to enter Purple Sun Grotto Heaven. This meant that unless the cultivator who had just inherited the position of true spirit died tragically, Sky Splitter Laozu would have no chance of advancing to the Pure Yang stage. This was not just because Sky Splitter Laozu's cultivation was insufficient, and he was unable to advance to the true spirit stage. Instead, Purple Sun Palace would deliberately suppress the appearance of a second true spirit, especially the Purple Sun Grotto Heaven's master who had just become a true spirit. With no other choice, Patriarch Heaven Splitter could only leave the Purple Sun Palace and establish the Heaven Splitter Sword faction. He attempted to rely on his own power to become a primary spirit cultivator, but in the end, he was no match for the heavens. This Patriarch Heaven Splitter's hopes of becoming a primary spirit cultivator fell short at the final step. He could only put all his effort into the legacy of the Heaven Splitter Sword faction, hoping that the cultivators of the Heaven Splitter Sword faction would eventually replace the Purple Sun Palace as the #1 sword faction in the world of cultivation, or even the 7th Holy Land in the world of cultivation. Over the past 10,000 years, Skyrim had its ups and downs. There had been 2 or 3 geniuses who had become true spirits, but there had also been the awkward situation of a lack of successors. However, Skyrim had always maintained its status as a large sect of the cultivation world, inheriting Skysplitter Laozu's legacy of surpassing Purple Sun Palace and becoming the 7th sacred land. However, even though Skysplitter Laozu was the #1 pure young sword immortal in Purple Sun Palace, he was limited by Purple Sun Palace's inheritance system. He did not fully control the sword technique inheritance of Purple Sun Palace. Among the 3 sets of heaven-splitting sword techniques that Purple Sun Palace had passed down to Zhao Daoren, he had only learned 2.5 sets. In fact, the 3 sets of splitting the heaven sword techniques passed down by Purple Sun Palace were 3 sets of combined attack sword techniques, and the 3 sets of combined attack sword techniques could actually form a splitting the heaven sword array. This splitting the heaven sword array required 6 sword cultivators to completely operate, and each of these 6 sword cultivators could only inherit half a set of splitting the heaven sword technique. In Purple Sun Palace's inheritance system, 6 people would inherit half a set of the 3 sets of heaven-splitting sword techniques in every generation, and they were not allowed to teach each other. Otherwise, they would be imprisoned for life, or their cultivation would be crippled. When needed, these 6 cultivators could form a complete heaven-splitting sword array. It was one of the most important trump cards of Purple Sun Palace apart from True Spirit Laozu's legacy. However, ever since Purple Sun Palace had been established as one of the 6 sacred grounds of the cultivation world, there had always been an endless stream of high-level cultivators, and there were always talented people with great power in every generation. Their position in the cultivation world was increasingly stable, and they did not need the heaven-splitting sword array to settle everything in the cultivation world. In addition, the heaven-splitting sword array had very strict requirements for the cultivators who formed it. As the 6 cultivators who inherited the sword array grew and encountered their own opportunities, their cultivation gradually became uneven, causing the power of the sword array to be greatly reduced. Therefore, although the heaven-splitting sword array had been passed down in Purple Sun Palace's history, it was rarely used. Back then, Skysplitter Laozu was already a pure young cultivator, and the cultivator of the same generation who inherited the other half of the heaven-splitting sword array was only a mid-Dharma cultivator, and he had also lost the possibility of surviving the Second Thunder Trial. If Purple Sun Palace really encountered a problem, just a pure young sword immortal would be enough to solve everything. So why would they need to activate the heaven-splitting sword array? Skysplitter Laozu was also one of the 6 inheritors of the 3 sets of sword techniques, and the half of the heaven-splitting sword array that he had inherited was the supreme sword technique that Fan Mingjie used today, the full moon sword technique. When Skysplitter Laozu left Purple Sun Palace, one of the mid-Dharma cultivators who had inherited half of the heaven-splitting sword array with Skysplitter Laozu had followed him. Therefore, Skyrind had inherited 2.5 sets of the heaven-splitting sword array, and the other half of the heaven-splitting sword array that Skyrind had inherited was the lunar light sword technique that Tian Buoyang was using today. When Xiang Palace proposed that the 6 heirs of the 3rd generation should join hands to fight against him in the second sword fight, Xiao Baiyu had already guessed that he would face this set of heaven-opening sword formation, which had never been lost in Xiang Palace but was rarely used in front of others. The 6 heirs of the Purple Sun Palace worked in pairs, trapping Xiao Baiyu in the center of the sword array. Among them, Yin Nanfei and Fan Mingjie, who had the highest level of cultivation and strength, respectively displayed the Golden Crow sword technique and the Full Moon sword technique, using a combined secret technique to form the twin swords of Sun and Moon, acting as the main force in the battle against Xiao Baiyu. On the other hand, Tian Buoyang's Lunar Moonlight sword technique and Xie Tianyang's Blazing Sky Sun sword technique formed the twin swords of Yin and Yang, whose strength was second only to the twin swords of Sun and Moon, standing on one side to restrain Xiao Baiyu. Among the 6, the weakest were Su Jin, who had just advanced to the late Dharma stage, and Guo Wanqing, who was still at the mid-Dharma stage. Of these 2, one used the soft ice sword, while the other used the dominating sword of the sun, forming the twin swords of ice and fire. They barely managed to form the heaven-splitting sword array with the other 4 according to the 3 positions of heaven, earth, and man, helping the other 4 to fight against Xiao Baiyu. The heaven-splitting sword array formed by the six of them also had a name, which was changing the sun and moon. It originated from Jiao Doran's act of splitting the heavens and the earth. Benefiting from the inheritance of sky-splitting Laozu, Xiao Baiyu naturally knew the power of the heaven-splitting sword array, which was one of the foundations of the Purple Sun Palace. Of course, he did not dare to let his guard down. However, during the previous sword battle, he had also confirmed the biggest weakness of this supreme sword array. If all six people in front of me were at the late Dharma stage, then it would not be too much for me to admit defeat in this battle. However, there are still two adepts in front of me who have not reached the late Dharma stage, so that's a different story. Furthermore, my one sword to break all techniques may not necessarily lose to the changing the sun and moon of the Purple Sun Palace. At this moment, the situation in the battle space changed. Xiao Baiyu, who was originally surrounded by the six heirs using the heaven-splitting sword array, was the first to attack. The sky splitter in his hand stabbed out twice in 4 different directions. The sword aura that could tear everything apart caused the expressions of the six heirs to change, and it also caused the surrounding adepts to become alert. The time for the real battle had come. Chapter 1441. The sky splitter in Xiao Baiyu's hand was not very fast. In an instant, it was only 2 stabs in different directions. However, the total of 8 stabs carried a destructive force that could tear apart everything in its path. But why was it aimed in 4 directions? There were only 6 people on the field, so how could there be 8 stabs? Just as everyone, including Lu Ping, was confused, only Wang Xianqing of the Purple Sun Palace, Laozu's expression changed. As the first-generation pure yang of the Purple Sun Palace, he had also mastered the full moon sword technique of the 6 paths of opening the heavens. Naturally, Wang Xianqing knew how to operate this heaven-splitting sword formation. That seemingly inexplicable and completely unnecessary stabs by Xiao Baiyu had, in fact, hit a crucial point in the operation of this sword formation. Indeed, the remaining stabs of sword light that were aimed at the other 6 people were blocked by the combined efforts of the 6 people. Among them, Yin Nanfei and Fan Mingjie had the easiest time blocking the attacks. The Sky Splitter Sword Qi did not even get within 30 feet of them before it was destroyed. Of the 2 stabs of Sky Splitter Sword Qi that were aimed at Xie Tianyang and Tian Boyang, one of them was easily destroyed by Xie Tianyang. However, Tian Boyang was slightly weaker. If not for Xie Tianyang's help, this sword Qi might have even pierced through his protective powers. However, in the end, it was still a daunting experience. As for Su Jin and Guo Wanqing, they were almost flustered when they were blocking the 2 stabs of Sky Splitter Sword Qi that were aimed at them. After all, Su Jin had just broken through to the late Dharma stage not long ago. The aura around his body had not stabilized yet. After breaking through to the late Dharma stage, all kinds of remarkable techniques would have different degrees of changes. At this time, Su Jin clearly could not adapt to this kind of increase very well. As a result, his cooperation with Guo Wanqing was a little out of practice. Fortunately, the 2 of them were not ordinary people after all. After a few panicked attacks, they were able to completely destroy the Sky Splitter Sword Qi before it pierced through their protective powers. However, this chaotic battle also caused the true essence within their bodies to be unable to be replenished for a time. Helpless, the 2 of them could only turn the grand formation and attempt to let the other 4 people successively support them so that the 2 of them could win a breather. The 6 of them had been nurtured by the Purple Sun Palace for a long time, so they naturally had an unusual tacit understanding of this sword formation. Su Jin and Guo Wanqing's predicament was quickly discovered by the other 4. As the formation changed, the 4 of them stepped forward while Su Jin and Guo Wanqing quickly retreated. However, just as the 2 sides changed their formation, Xiao Baiyu's mouth twitched slightly. The sword Qi that he had sent out in the 4th direction just so happened to appear in the direction where Su Jin and Guo Wanqing were retreating. Su Jin and Guo Wanqing were suddenly startled. They could only try their best to resist the sword Qi that suddenly appeared in the direction where they were retreating. However, the 2 of them paused, causing the 2 of them to be separated from the 4 people in front of them, causing an error to appear in the operation of the entire sword formation. Xiao Baiyu let out a long roar and casually waved the sky splitter in his hand. Yin Nanfei and Fan Mingjie, who had lost the support of the entire sword formation, could only face Xiao Baiyu's frontal attack alone. Even though the two of them had joined hands to perform a joint secret technique, they were still forcibly pushed back 30 feet by Xiao Baiyu's sword. Xie Tianyang and Tian Boyang, who were standing to the side, saw that the situation was far from good. They had no time to help Su Jin and Guo Wanqing, who had been battered by the sword chi that Xiao Baiyu had laid out beforehand. They hastily rushed forward in an attempt to help Yin Nanfei and Fan Mingjie resist Xiao Baiyu's powerful attack. However, at this moment, the momentum of Xiao Baiyu's sword suddenly changed. He suddenly gave up on attacking Yin Nanfei and Fan Mingjie and turned around to pounce on Su Jin and Guo Wanqing. Making a feint in the east and attacking in the west, Su Jin and Guo Wanqing were originally the weakest combination among the 6 people. Although Xiao Baiyu was strong, Xiao Baiyu still did not let his guard down even though the sword formation was already showing signs of disarray. Instead, he grabbed onto the weak points of the sword formation and wanted to destroy the entire sword formation in one go. However, at this moment, the pure Yang Laozu and Wang Xianqing of the Purple Sun Palace, who were previously a little nervous, suddenly let out a sigh of relief. Qi Lianying could not help but exclaim when he saw the sudden change in the battlefield. Ah, this Xiao Baiyu is so powerful. He actually caused the sword formation of the Purple Sun Palace to become disorderly so easily. However, Lu Ping's expression was a little solemn as he said in a deep voice, "It seems that Xiao Baiyu is very familiar with this sword formation. However, I'm afraid it won't be that easy to destroy the heaven-splitting sword formation." Qi Lianying looked at the two sides that were fighting in the battlefield with a trace of surprise. Xiao Baiyu's sudden change in attack had once again caused the entire sword formation to change. It seemed that Xiao Baiyu had already taken the initiative, and the entire heaven-splitting sword formation was being manipulated by him. Qi Lianying was puzzled. Since Xiao Baiyu is very familiar with the sword formation of the Purple Sun Palace, why is it so difficult to destroy this sword formation? Lu Ping smiled and said, "Skyrend and the Purple Sun Palace are of the same origin. Since Xiao Baiyu is familiar with the heaven-splitting sword formation, how could the Purple Sun Palace not be aware of it?" Qi Lianying said in surprise, "You're saying that he's beating us at our own game?" As soon as Qi Lianying finished speaking, the battlefield changed again. The sword formation, which had been thrown into chaos by Xiao Baiyu's sudden attack, suddenly took a step to the left in the face of Xiao Baiyu's powerful attack. Many of the cultivators watching the battle in the field exclaimed in annoyance, "Oh, why did he get out of the way? Didn't he open the formation to let Xiao Baiyu out? What else can they do? If they take Xiao Baiyu's attack head-on, I'm afraid that even if Su Jin and Guo Wanqing work together, they will be heavily injured. But at least they can trap Xiao Baiyu in the sword formation. At least they have a chance to defeat him. If they let Xiao Baiyu out, Xiao Baiyu will at least be undefeatable in this battle." It's human nature. No one can remain fearless in the face of death. Qi Lianying only saw a trace of mockery in Lu Ping's eyes. She then spat out 2 words, "Idiot." Qi Lianying blushed slightly. In fact, she also thought that Su Jin and Guo Wanqing had dodged because they couldn't block Xiao Baiyu's attack. However, the situation changed in an instant. Just as Su Jin and Guo Wanqing dodged to the left, a flaw appeared in the formation. Unexpectedly, Xiao Baiyu ignored this opportunity and did not choose to break through the sword formation from there. What's going on? This is a great opportunity. What's wrong with Xiao Baiyu? Could it be that even the sky-splitting sword saint would make a mistake? Even such an obvious flaw. At this point, he suddenly paused, and then there was a strange silence. The same thought appeared in everyone's mind. Is this really Xiao Baiyu's mistake? Did the sky-splitting sword saint really not see this flaw? Or perhaps it was simply their eyes that were blind. Although the crowd was unwilling to admit it, they were actually more inclined to the last thought. Finally, many of the cultivators from the sects, including the heirs of the sacred grounds, had no choice but to let go of their reservations and ask the seniors from the sects beside them. Although Qi Lianying could not hear what the seniors were saying, he could see that many of Lao Zu's expressions were extremely solemn. It was as if he was lecturing them while explaining to them. Many of the heirs also blushed and lowered their eyelids in silence. Most of this was happening in the sects that had pure young patriarchs. As for the other sects that only had great cultivators leading their disciples to spectate the battle, only a very small number of veteran great cultivators with profound cultivation bases seemed to have noticed something. Many of the other great cultivators seemed to be a little embarrassed in the face of the inquiries from the juniors of their sects, and they seemed to have said something to evade the question. The disciples of their sects were also a little disappointed. Qi Lianying twisted the soft flesh on Lu Ping's waist and said angrily, "Tell me, what happened just now?" Feeling the pain, Lu Ping hurriedly begged for mercy and explained, "Just now, Xiao Baiyu's attack seemed to have caused the entire sword formation to stagnate, and Xiao Baiyu's dodging caused a flaw in the formation. However, what they did not see was that at this moment, Yin Nanfei and Fan Mingjie, as well as Xie Tianyang and Guo Wanqing, who were standing behind Xiao Baiyu, had already made their preparations, coincidentally forming a corner with where Xiao Baiyu and Guo Wanqing had just left. Qi Lianying exclaimed in surprise, "But the two of them have dodged it. The pincer attack won't work." "That's right." Lu Ping nodded and said, "The pincer attack won't work, but if Xiao Baiyu were to break out from there, Yin Nanfei, Fan Mingjie, Xie Tianyang, and Tian Buliang wouldn't be able to dodge the joint attack from behind." Lu Ping continued to explain. If Xiao Baiyu only wanted to break out of the encirclement and escape, he would have already rushed out from there. However, he didn't want to escape. This is a sword battle under the watchful eyes of everyone. What Xiao Baiyu wants is a fair and honorable victory. If he had rushed out from there, even with his pure young physique, he would inevitably be injured by the joint attack of the four people behind him. At that time, in order to win, he would have to turn back and fight against the sword formation formed by the six people. No matter how you look at it, this exchange is a great loss. In that instant, Xiao Baiyu saw that this was a trap purposely set up by the six swords of the Ziyang Palace, so he purposely stayed in the sword formation. Just as Lu Ping was explaining to Qi Lianying what had just happened, the spectating cultivators suddenly cried out in surprise. The two sides of the sword battle were once again stirred up. After Xiao Baiyu gave up the opportunity to break out of the sword formation using his familiarity with the heaven-splitting sword formation, Yin Nanfei and Fan Mingjie's swords were already aimed at Xiao Baiyu's back. At the same time, the two of them moved their feet slightly. The opening that was revealed by Su and Guo's dodging had already been blocked by the two of them. The moment the two flying swords left their hands, one was like the scorching sun in the sky, flashing with a blazing light, while the other was like the cold moon, flashing with a cold light. However, it just so happened that the natural phenomenon caused by the two flying swords gave off a strange and harmonious feeling. Only the great power contained within was shocking. Sword of Sun and Moon, the two of them used the most powerful move of the heaven-splitting sword technique. Sun and Moon shine together. At the same time, Xie Tianyang and Tian Buliang took a step forward and attacked Xiao Baiyu from the side, trying to force him back and at the same time remove the threat he posed to Su and Guo. In this way, Xiao Baiyu would once again be surrounded by the six people of the heaven-splitting sword formation. The two flying swords of Lingbao set off each other. One was masculine like rolling pure yang qi, while the other was feminine like a drizzle. The combination of the two swords was the killing move of yin-yang double swords, called yin-yang double kill. However, how could Xiao Baiyu let them do as they wished so easily? After realizing that the six swords of the Ziyang Palace were also not setting a trap because of his familiarity with the heaven-splitting sword formation, Xiao Baiyu once again made a choice that exceeded the expectations of the six swords. He did not dodge the attacks from the two sides from different directions, nor did he forcefully block the attacks and continue to entangle Su and Guo, the weakest link. Instead, he suddenly turned around and rushed towards Xie Tianyang and Tian Buliang. The heaven-splitting sword shone brightly, one sword to destroy all techniques. The void was suddenly torn open. The surrounding pure young experts and Lu Ping who were watching the battle hurriedly joined forces to maintain the battle space. A faint loud bang could be heard coming from an unknown direction. A strange expression flashed across Lu Ping's face. In the middle of the dueling dimension, the crack in space had instantly engulfed the sword light of the twin swords of Sun and Moon. If Yin Nanfei and Fan Mingjie had not been alert and had hurriedly controlled their flying swords to avoid the void of the sword light, it was likely that their flying swords would have been engulfed as well. However, at the moment when Yin Nanfei and Fan Mingjie suffered a setback, the heaven-splitting sword Qi in Xiao Baiyu's hand had already flown out once again. Although Xiet Tianyang and Tian Boyang's yin-yang dual swords were tyrannical, when the two of them erupted in an instant, the entire battle space seemed to be covered by the light from the explosion. In the blink of an eye, Lu Ping had already spread his divine sense throughout the entire battle space. At this moment, the entire process of the sword battle was clearly displayed in Lu Ping's divine sense. Xie Tianyang's blazing celestial yang sword was tyrannical enough. However, Tian Boyang's cultivation was still a notch lower. In the instant when the two swords clashed, Tian Boyang's lunar moonlight sword suddenly ran out of power. Xiao Baiyu forcefully broke through the obstruction of the yin-yang dual swords and went straight for Tian Boyang. What a good Xiao Baiyu! His previous arrangements were not aimed at the weakest link in the battle, Su Jin and Guo Wanqing. Instead, they were aimed at Xie Tianyang and Tian Boyang. This move had indeed exceeded the expectations of the six swords. Fortunately, the sky-splitting sword formation was not a sword formation for just one or two people. The six of them had a tacit understanding of each other. In the instant that Yin Nanfei and Fan Mingjie's attacks were blocked, the sword formation changed again. Su Jin and Guo Wanqing, who had already recovered from the pressure from Xiao Baiyu's earlier attacks, charged forward once again. Clearly, the two of them had already realized that the situation was not looking good. If they were unable to block Xiao Baiyu this time, it was highly likely that he would forcefully break through the sky-splitting sword formation. Hence, this attack was the strongest attack of the Ice and Fire dual swords, the 9 heavens of Ice and Fire. In the battle space, another deafening sound shook the heavens. Among the direct disciples of the various sects who were spectating the battle, there were some who were only mid-Dharma adepts. Under this deafening sound, expressions of pain appeared on their faces. Lu Ping had long been aware of this. In the instant that the techniques of both parties clashed, he had already moved to protect Qi Lianying, who was beside him. However, Qi Lianying could only see a vast expanse of white in front of him. Although many of the direct disciples of the various sects had temporarily lost their sight and hearing due to the huge change in the battlefield, there were still quite a number of Laozus from the various sects who had been aware of the changes in the battlefield. At this moment, they heard several cries of surprise. Pure Yang spirit treasures. Pure Yang sword weapons. This is the sky-splitting sword formation that has been passed down from the Purple Sun Palace to Jiao Daoren. The light in the battlefield dissipated. The attack that Xiao Baiyu had used to kill Tian Boyang had been blocked by Xiet Tianyang. Even so, the two of them had still been sent flying back several feet by Xiao Baiyu's attack. Tian Boyang still had a lingering fear in his heart, while Xie Tianyang's face was pale. It was obvious that helping Tian Boyang block Xiao Baiyu's killing blow had been an extremely heavy burden on Xie Tianyang. However, at this moment, Yin Nanfei and Fan Mingjie had already arrived. The six of them had already formed the sky-splitting sword formation, once again trapping Xiao Baiyu within the sword formation. Su Jin and Guo Wanqing's combined attack had been casually neutralized by Xiao Baiyu. At this moment, Xiao Baiyu's gaze was fixed on the blazing heaven sun sword in Xie Tianyang's hand. He, the sky-splitting sword formation, a pure Yang spiritual treasure. The 3 pure Yang flying swords that the Purple Sun Palace had obtained from Jiao Daoren to split open the heavens. I presume that you've already brought them with you. Are you still going to hide them at this time? Apart from the blazing heaven sun sword in Xie Tianyang's hand that was emitting a dense pure Yang aura, indicating its identity as a pure Yang spiritual treasure, the frost silk sword in Su Jin's hand similarly emitted the aura of a pure Yang spiritual treasure as it flashed with cold light. The azure sky full moon sword in Fan Mingjie's hand also released its concealment. Xiao Baiyu laughed involuntarily and said, "Looks like the Purple Sun Palace has gone through a lot of trouble to make me stay here. They've even used the supreme treasures of the Purple Sun Palace on these juniors. Aren't they afraid that these juniors will meet with an accident and lose these sect-guarding treasures? At this moment, not only Xiao Baiyu, but the cultivators from the various sects who were watching the battle outside also had expressions of shock. Even Lu Ping was muttering, I never expected that the spiritual treasure that Brother Xie has been holding all this time would actually be one of the 3 sky-splitting pure yang swords of the Purple Sun Palace. In reality, it was not only Lu Ping and the others who had not expected this. Even Xie Tianyang and the others had not expected that the spiritual treasure bestowed by the sect in their hands would actually be the sect-guarding treasures before they found out about the second duel with Xiao Baiyu. One of the founders of the Purple Sun Palace, Lao Zhu, had been Zhao Doran's concubine back then. These 3 pure yang swords were also the spiritual treasures that Zhao Doran had eliminated in the process of splitting open the heavens, so he had given them to his concubine. In fact, these 3 pure yang swords should have been 3 pairs of pure yang spiritual treasures. However, Zhao Daoran did not have the sky-splitting divine weapons that the other 6 sky-splitting Lao Zhu regarded as spiritual treasures. It was unknown how many of his flying swords had been destroyed in the process of splitting open the heavens. These 3 pure yang swords were the 3 pairs of spiritual treasure flying swords used to split open the heavens. After one of them was destroyed, the remaining one was not suitable for him, so Zhao Daoran had casually given it to his concubine and passed down the corresponding sky-splitting sword divine power. Unfortunately, the 3 sets of sky-splitting sword divine powers were used to control 2 flying swords. However, each of the 3 pure yang swords was a single sword, so they could not be used to perform the sky-splitting sword divine power that Zhao Daoran had passed down. The founder of the Purple Sun Palace, Lao Zhu, was also a genius. She had forcibly separated the 3 sets of sky-splitting sword divine powers into 6 separate sets of supreme sword techniques so that she could use each sky-splitting sword's power individually. Chapter 1442. The appearance of the 3 heaven-opening swords caused a stir in the battle arena. Originally, Xiao Baiyu could still rely on his familiarity with the heaven-opening sword formation to deal with the 6 people, but after the appearance of the 3 pure yang swords, the situation suddenly changed. Although the appearance of the pure yang spiritual treasures caused the gap between the 6 people to widen, this widening gap was completely covered up by the sudden increase in strength of Xie Tianyang, Su Jin, and Fan Mingjie. Xiao Baiyu was trapped in the sword formation and surrounded by the 6 people, completely at a disadvantage. In the cultivation world, one might not even see a pure yang spiritual treasure in 1,000 years. However, the 3 pure yang swords on the field were not to be underestimated. They were inherited from heaven opening and were nurtured by Zhao Daoran. They were imbued with Zhao Doran's aura. Although they could not be compared to heaven opening divine weapons, they were not ordinary pure yang spiritual treasures. Lu Ping saw that the sword chi on the field was crisscrossing. The heaven-opening sword formation was fully unleashed. Although it seemed to have more flaws, in fact, its power was stronger. Even someone as strong as Xiao Baiyu could not do anything against the fleeting flaws of the sword formation. Seeing this, Lu Ping sank his mind into the core space. He saw the sword of true spirit trembling due to the attraction of the heaven-opening sword formation. At the same time, there was also the motionless praying mantis in 2. Lu Ping comforted his natal sword and asked the pure yang spiritual treasure with a smile, "Can the heaven-opening sword formation on the field be cut?" The praying mantis said with a rare solemn expression, "No." Lu Ping was surprised. "It's rare. Lord Having actually has a time when he is ashamed of his inferiority." The praying mantis snorted and said, "I was personally taught by Taoist Chan. The water-dissolving talisman is not weaker than the heaven-opening sword formation. The only difference is that it has not been nurtured for long enough and its foundation is not strong enough. If you advance to pure yang and nurture your body for 500 years with pure yang vital energy, you will definitely be on par with it." Lu Ping nodded. Based on the quality of the pure yang scissors, the mantis was right. Turning back to look at the battlefield, Xiao Baiyu was still in a disadvantageous position, but he was still relying on the absolute power of the heaven-opening sword technique to barely maintain the situation. Although he was still at a disadvantage, it was much better than when he was besieged by the 6 people. When had the sky-splitting sword saint, the #1 cultivator of pure yang, ever fallen to such a state? Lao Tzu, who was watching the battle from the various sects, sighed. At the same time, he was secretly amazed at the depth of Purple Sun Palace's foundation, boldness, and farsightedness. As the sect's guardian treasures, the 3 heaven-opening swords had actually been given to the younger generation for many years. They had been nurtured by the younger generation for many years, and their minds were connected to each other. In a battle of magical powers, they could display an additional 20% of their power for no reason. The 3 heaven-opening sword techniques linked together to form a heaven-opening sword array. With the 3 heaven-opening swords as the lead, they formed a huge sword net. Even someone like Xiao Baiyu could only be a trapped beast. Once the time was up, the sword array would operate to the extreme, and the outcome would be decided. However, Lu Ping knew that Xiao Baiyu's means were naturally not limited to this. Although he had already used the heaven-opening sword technique, the spiritual treasure sky-splitting sword in his hand still did not reveal the quality of its pure yang spiritual treasure. The flying sword in Xiao Baiyu's hand was also forged with the heaven-opening sword that Zhao Daoren left in the East Sea as the foundation. Although it was only a broken sword, Xiao Baiyu did not hesitate to go through the tribulation together with it to become a natal spiritual treasure. Now that it had reached pure yang, its quality was at least not weaker than any of the 3 heaven-opening swords on the battlefield. Indeed, Xiao Baiyu also knew that he would probably be defeated if this continued. Xiao Baiyu, who had been bitterly defending under the siege of the heaven-opening sword array, suddenly erupted. 8 pitch-black cracks appeared in the surroundings. After absorbing the sword flashes that attacked like a violent storm, the sky-splitting sword chi returned to Xiao Baiyu's hand. A resplendent brilliance instantly broke through the surrounding sword chi brilliance. The 4th pure yang sword chi soared into the sky. Amidst the exclamations of the surrounding cultivators, Xiao Baiyu instantly launched a counterattack. The situation changed again. Although Xiao Baiyu did not break through the obstruction of the sword array in one fell swoop, he had completely suppressed the 6 swords of Purple Sun Palace. Previously, due to the difference between the 3 pure yang sword chi and the 3 tribulation spiritual treasures, Xiao Baiyu quickly found a flaw in the sword array. This was because the flying sword in Xiao Baiyu's hand also displayed the brilliance of a pure yang spiritual treasure. The sky-splitting sword slashed out, but there was no sword chi brilliance in the void. Instead, a pitch-black spatial crack was slashed open. Then, 2 sword flashes, one bright and one dark, were forcibly torn out of the sword array's light net by the pitch-black spatial crack. It was such a tiny flaw that Xiao Baiyu instantly tore a huge hole in the sword array. Xiao Baiyu took advantage of the situation and slashed out 8 times. Each sword blocked the 6 people and tried to make up for this flaw. At the same time, he also tried his best to expand the gap in the sword array that he had torn. Seeing that the flaws in the sword formation were getting bigger and bigger, and Xiao Baiyu would soon break out of the encirclement, another unexpected change took place in the sword formation. This set of heaven-opening sword formation was originally a 6-person sword formation, formed by a fixed 2-person joint attack. Seeing that Xiao Baiyu was about to forcibly break the siege of the sword formation with the advantage of the heaven-opening sword and his strong pure yang cultivation, the 6 swords of Purple Sun Palace suddenly changed the formation. Yin Nanfei and Fan Mingjie, who were originally the main force against Xiao Baiyu, suddenly left with the array. The spectators exclaimed, thinking that the 6 swords of Purple Sun Palace were no longer able to stop Xiao Baiyu. Instead, they were going to let him break out of the sword array and then block him. However, although the heaven-splitting sword array was powerful, once someone broke out of the sword array, how much of its power would be left? Would the 6 of them be able to stop Xiao Baiyu's heaven-splitting sword if he broke out of the sword array? No, the 6 swords were not giving up on the sword array. Just as Yin Nanfei and Fan Mingjie retreated to block Xiao Baiyu's path, 2 people suddenly appeared in front of Xiao Baiyu, one on the left and one on the right. It was Xie Tianyang and Su Jin. What? The 2 of them had actually separated from their respective partners. To put it bluntly, The heaven-splitting sword array used 3 sets of heaven-splitting sword techniques as its foundation. If the two of them separated from their partners, how could the sword array still be formed? Just when the crowd thought that the heaven-splitting sword array had been thrown into chaos by Xiao Baiyu, and that the 6 swords were powerless to continue, Su Jin's cold ice soft sword pierced through Xiao Baiyu's heaven-splitting sword chi. Like a flying needle with a thread, it instantly sewed up the spatial crack that had been torn open by the heaven-splitting sword chi. This was not enough to stop Xiao Baiyu from breaking out of the encirclement. Su Jin's actions, after leaving the support of the sword array, were like a mantis trying to stop a chariot in front of Xiao Baiyu. However, without waiting for the crowd to see any clues, Xie Tianyang's sword ignited with raging flames. After the cold ice soft sword eliminated Xiao Baiyu's heaven-splitting sword chi, it charged towards Xiao Baiyu. It was as if the spatial crack that had been sewn up was ironed once again, making it even smoother and without any twists and turns. However, at the same time, the heaven-splitting sword array was also ironed. The sword array that Xiao Baiyu had broken through suddenly took a turn and Xiao Baiyu was once again pushed back into the sword array. This sudden movement made the cultivators of the various sects unable to take it all in. However, the cultivators of the various sects quickly saw the clues and cried out in surprise. What Xie Tianyang used in that instant was not the Raging Inferno Heaven Sun sword, but rather the Extreme Yang Tyrannical sword that was fused with the Cold Ice Soft sword. According to the inheritance rules of the Purple Yang Palace, the 3 heaven-splitting sword techniques and the 6 supreme sword techniques had never been passed down to a single person. There had never been a rule where one person could learn 2 techniques. In fact, other than Jiao Daoren who passed down the heaven-splitting sword, even the founder Laozu and the true spirit cultivators of the Purple Yang Palace could only learn 1 technique by themselves. However, at this moment, Xie Tianyang was impressively using the other heaven-splitting sword technique apart from the Raging Inferno Heaven Sun sword technique, the Extreme Yang Tyrannical sword. The Extreme Yang Tyrannical sword and the Cold Ice Soft sword instantly formed a joint attack. Both Xie Tianyang and Su Jin were not late Dharma adepts, so their joint attack power was far above the combination of Yin Nanfei and Fan Mingjie. Even the attack that Xiao Baiyu had planned for a long time to break through was forcefully blocked by the two of them. Xiao Baiyu had no choice but to be forced back into the sword array once again. This was because the two of them were wielding 2 heaven-splitting pure yang swords. The combination of the 2 swords, coupled with the joint attack power, had more than doubled their power. This was also because the pure yang spiritual treasures, the Raging Inferno Heaven Sun sword and the Cold Ice Soft sword were not exactly a pair of flying swords. Otherwise, the combination of the 2 swords could even directly suppress Xiao Baiyu and not force him back. How did he do it? How was he able to master the Extreme Yang Tyrannical sword after mastering the Raging Inferno Heaven Sun sword technique? This question caused Xiao Baiyu to cry out in surprise in his heart. The surrounding cultivators who were watching the battle also had the same question. Only Wang Xianqing had a smug look on his face, as if he had already expected this to happen. Of the 3 sets of joint attack power, the Supreme 6 Dao sword technique could only be passed down to 6 people. This was not because of the restrictions of the sect, but because it was impossible. Before advancing to the pure yang stage, all the cultivators from the Ziyang Palace who tried to master 2 heaven-splitting techniques or 1 set of joint attack power had all failed without exception. This even brought about serious consequences for the cultivators themselves. It was precisely because of this that the Ziyang Palace had set the tradition of only passing down 1 set of techniques to each person. As time passed, the Ziyang Palace had forgotten the reason for this rule and simply carried it out. However, there was no lack of talented people in this world, and Xie Tianyang was undoubtedly one of the best among them. Xie Tianyang was able to successfully master both the Raging Inferno Heaven Sun sword technique and the Extreme Yang Tyrannical sword technique. He could even use them without being affected. However, at this moment, Lu Ping was narrowing his eyes and thinking about something after the 6 swords of the Ziyang Palace suddenly changed formation. Lu Ping suddenly sensed a trace of familiarity when Xie Tianyang's sword technique suddenly changed from the Raging Inferno Heaven Sun sword technique to the Extreme Yang Tyrannical sword technique. That was the shadow of the sky-splitting sword technique. That's right, it was exactly so. The reason why Xie Tianyang was able to control two heaven-splitting sword techniques of Extreme Yang and Extreme Yang was precisely because of the inspiration from the sky-splitting sword technique. Chapter 1443. Lu Ping had also mastered the boiling sky sword technique, but he rarely used it. This was because although this sword technique was of the water element, it actually contained the fire element. As the saying went, boiling sky sword technique, the word boiling vividly displayed the essence of this supreme sword technique. The bubbling sky sword skill was, in fact, a sword skill that combined water and fire. It didn't seem to have much to do with Xie Tianyang's mastery of the two extreme yang and unyielding heaven-opening sword skills, but Lu Ping could vaguely feel that the key to the bubbling sky sword skill's ability to combine water and fire was also the key to Xie Tianyang's mastery of the two heaven-opening sword skills. Lu Ping scolded in a low voice. This guy has taken advantage of us. How could we have given him the boiling sky sword technique so easily back then? The sudden change in the heaven-opening sword formation caught Xiao Baiyu off guard. The two great cultivators, Su Jin and Xie Tianyang, used the two pure yang swords to perform a combined attack as the main attack. For a moment, Xiao Baiyu was once again suppressed to the point where he could only defend himself. The situation was even more embarrassing than when the three pure yang spiritual treasure flying swords had appeared. In reality, the weakness of the heaven-splitting sword formation was now even greater. After Xie Tianyang and Su Jin had joined forces, the remaining two, Guowanqing and Tianboyang, were simply unable to control the two heaven-splitting sword techniques like Xie Tianyang. Hence, the two of them were actually working together on the surface. Moreover, their mid-dharma level of training was already the biggest weakness of the heaven-splitting sword formation. However, at this time, Xiao Baiyu, who was completely suppressed, had no time to care about such an obvious flaw. In fact, the heaven-opening sword formation of the Ziyang Palace had not been flawless from the beginning. From the cultivation of Guowanqing and Tianboyang, to the original three pairs of pure yang swords, to the current weakest Guowanqing and Tianboyang joining forces, the flaws of the sword formation were actually becoming more and more obvious. However, at the same time, as the sword formation changed, the power of the sword formation also became stronger, and the growth of the sword formation's power was always greater than the increase in the number of flaws. This allowed the six swords to maintain the suppression of Xiao Baiyu. Even though the flaws in the sword formation were so obvious, Xiao Baiyu was unable to seize the opportunity. The various cultivators Laozu fell silent. At this time, even the weakest of the spectators, the mid-dharma adepts, could clearly see the flaws in the sword formation. However, even Lu Ping himself thought that if it were Xiao Baiyu, he would not be able to seize the opportunity under such a siege. Qi Lianying asked with some uncertainty, "Is Xiao Baiyu going to lose?" Lu Ping chuckled softly and said, "No, I'm afraid the Ziyang Palace is going to lose this time." "How can that be?" Qi Lianying was puzzled. In this battle, the six swords of the Ziyang Palace clearly have the upper hand. Xiao Baiyu is almost suppressed to the point where he can only defend and has no power to fight back. Qi Lianying looked at the two sides in the battle and said boldly, "I can see that in less than 5 minutes, Xiao Baiyu's defense will be broken." Lu Ping nodded and said, "Even you can see that Xiao Baiyu may not be able to hold on for a long time under this kind of attack. But have you ever thought about how long the six swords of Ziyang Palace can last under this kind of attack?" Qi Lianying was stunned when he heard this. He looked at the battlefield and said hesitantly, "You mean vital energy?" Lu Ping said approvingly, "That's right. Anyone can see that Xiao Baiyu is definitely at a disadvantage, but I'm afraid there are not many people who can see how long both sides can last." Looking at Lu Ping's smug smile, Qi Lianying rolled his eyes and scolded, "Shame on you." At that moment, the battle between the two sides became even more intense. The six swords of the Ziyang Palace launched wave after wave of attacks at Xiao Baiyu, who was trapped in the sword formation. However, although Xiao Baiyu was in a passive position, he was still able to defend himself very firmly. At that moment, The heirs of the various sects who were watching the battle were more or less certain that Xiao Baiyu would not be able to last long. Many of them revealed looks of excitement. To most cultivators, being able to witness the number one pure yang cultivator, the sky-splitting sword sage Xiao Baiyu, was probably the first time in their entire cultivation lives that they would ever see such a pinnacle battle again. Only the pure yang cultivators from the various sects, Lao Zhu, could see some clues. The attacks of the 6 swords of the Ziyang Palace seemed like a violent storm, but in fact, they were already in their final frenzy. At that moment, the most anxious person was the pure yang cultivators from the Ziyang Palace, Wang Xianqing. He naturally knew the situation of the 6 swords very well. The 6 swords of the Ziyang Palace were now at the end of their tether. If they could not completely defeat Xiao Baiyu before their vital energy ran out, they would be the ones defeated once Xiao Baiyu caught his breath and launched a counterattack. The pure yang cultivators from the various sects could see some clues, and so could Xiao Baiyu, who was currently being besieged. However, as the dignified sky-splitting sword sage and known as the number one pure yang cultivator, he did not expect to be forced into such a miserable state by a few juniors. He had no choice but to defend himself and rely on his dense vital energy to wear down his opponent's spirit. If he won this way, he would probably be criticized by the cultivation world. However, Xiao Baiyu could not lose. Skyrin's current achievements could be said to be tied to Xiao Baiyu alone. If he lost this battle, the sky-splitting sword sage's morale would definitely be affected. What followed would probably be the combined forces of the various sects to kick him while he was down. Therefore, he had to win. No matter how ugly the situation was or how unsightly his methods were, he had to win. Not only did he have to win, but he also had to take the opportunity to completely destroy the heaven-splitting sword formation of the Ziyang Palace. At the very least, he had to make the efforts of this generation of the Ziyang Palace go down the drain. Only then could he, Xiao Baiyu, do whatever he wanted in the cultivation world without the presence of the true spirits. He was able to kill LV Taiching and destroy the heaven-splitting sword formation that the practitioners of the Ziyang Palace had painstakingly cultivated. Now, he could destroy the heaven-splitting sword formation of the Ziyang Palace. Especially the most talented direct disciple, who was ranked 6th, could actually break the record of the Ziyang Palace since its founding. He was able to master 2 heaven-splitting sword techniques at the late Dharma stage. This person could not be allowed to live. Sai, who would have thought that the great sky-splitting sword sage would be forced into such a state? Even if he wins, I'm afraid that his reputation as the first pure yang practitioner will be greatly damaged in the cultivation world. Qi Lianying had always been cultivating in the East Sea. Naturally, she regarded the famous Xiao Baiyu as a celestial being. Now that she saw the situation in the arena, her thoughts were probably more representative of what the practitioners of the various sects would think of Xiao Baiyu after the news of this battle spread across the world. However, at this moment, Qi Lianying suddenly felt something strange around her. When she looked at Lu Ping in surprise, she saw that Lu Ping had a serious expression on his face. His eyes were fixed on the 2 dueling parties in the arena. The flashing green and red light even penetrated 3 feet away. His entire body was emitting a heavy aura, like a dragon diving into the water, ready to attack at any time. Qi Lianying was horrified. When she looked at the arena, the 2 dueling parties suddenly changed again. Xiao Baiyu, who had been fighting like a cornered beast, suddenly counterattacked. The sky-splitting sword Qi instantly filled the surroundings, as if it wanted to cut open a new void within 10 feet of him. The tide-like attack launched by the sword formation formed by the 6 swords was instantly annihilated by the sky-splitting sword Qi. The originally aggressive 6 swords of Ziyang Palace were instantly reversed. The spatial cracks that annihilated everything made it impossible for Xie Tianyang to escape. The thin, true essence in his body was not even enough for him to activate the heaven-splitting sword in his hand. In an instant, Xie Tianyang felt despair. He smiled bitterly in his heart. I never thought that there would come a day when I, Xie Tianyang, would close my eyes and wait for death. Suddenly, a series of ear-piercing explosions rang out in the air. Xie Tianyang knew that this was not only the sound of the sword chi clashing, but also the sound of the intense spatial tremors. Xie Tianyang suddenly felt his body lighten. The annihilation space that had imprisoned him had suddenly disappeared. The intense spiritual energy turbulence allowed Xie Tianyang to immediately confirm that this dueling space, which had been maintained by the various Laozus, was collapsing. A furious shout suddenly rang out in the sky. Lu Tianping, you're trying to stop me. Chapter 1444. Xiao Baiyu was bent on killing Xie Tianyang. At that moment, Xie Tianyang was powerless to resist. Just as he was about to stretch out his neck to be chopped off, he suddenly heard Xiao Baiyu's furious bellow. Lu Tianping, you want to stop me? The heart-palpitating sky-rending sword chi was still being annihilated, but this time, it was the sword chi itself that was being annihilated. Lu Ping had used the Sword of True Spirit to block Xiao Baiyu's sure-kill strike. The resulting turbulence caused the combat space, which had already reached its limit, to explode. Having escaped death, Xie Tianyang could no longer care about the lack of quintessential essence in his body. He forcefully steered the pure yang sword to stand beside Lu Ping and face Xiao Baiyu. Lu Ping's expression was calm as he said, I've already said that Xie Tianyang is my close friend. Senior, you cannot kill him. If it were any other time, Xiao Baiyu would have already killed anyone who tried to stop him. Even if it was Lu Ping who tried to stop him, Xiao Baiyu would still want to gauge the strength of the North Sea Water Sword Immortal. However, at that moment, even though Xiao Baiyu had used his quintessential essence to wear down the Purple Sun Palace's 6 swords, he had also exhausted himself greatly. Furthermore, Purple Sun Palace's pure Yang Laozu and Wang Xianqing were attacking from behind. The moment Xiao Baiyu was stopped by Lu Ping, he had already lost the opportunity to kill Xie Tianyang. Xiao Baiyu harumphed coldly. Knowing that he could not stay any longer, he turned around and blocked Wang Xuanqing's attack with his sword. However, Wang Xuanqing's strike caused him to spit out a mouthful of blood. He turned around and flew into the distance. In the end, Xiao Baiyu was first besieged by 6 swords, then he exchanged blows with Lu Ping, and finally, Wang Xuanqing's sword caused his blood and qi to churn. This was a solid pure yang attack, and Xiao Baiyu could no longer withstand it as he spat out a mouthful of blood. Just as Wang Xianqing was about to give chase, he saw Xiao Baiyu pointing his sword at Tianbuliang, who was heavily injured after the sword formation was broken. With this sword slash, Tianbuliang, who was completely defenseless, could only wait for death. Wang Xianqing turned pale with fright. One of the Purple Sun Palace's 6 swords had already been destroyed. If another one died, the heaven-splitting sword formation would probably have no hope of recovering. In desperation, Wang Xianqing had to divert the sword momentum to intercept Xiao Baiyu's heaven-splitting sword qi to save Tianbuliang. However, Xiao Baiyu took advantage of this time to transform into an escape light. Just as the battle space collapsed and a huge change occurred on the battlefield, the relationship between the cultivators of the various sects seemed to be extremely subtle at this moment. Some were watching from the sidelines, while others were eager to give it a try. However, apart from Lu Ping and Wang Xianqing, no one tried to save any of the 6 swords who were powerless to fight back. Instead, the cultivators of the other sacred lands joined forces to intercept and kill Xiao Baiyu. Unexpectedly, the 7 Fans Laozu, Full Moon Laozu, and Feng Lu Laozu secretly stopped them. Lu Ping killed Xiao Baiyu but didn't save Lu Jian. But in an instant, he clearly saw the plan in the hearts of all sects on the scene. At this moment, Lu Ping suddenly attacked again. The Sword of True Spirit pierced through the void. Liang Jinfei, who was about to leave with his granduncle master, suddenly heard an explosion in the void beside him. Liang Jinfei was so frightened that he hurriedly shook his sword to defend himself. However, he saw a tiny flying needle being chopped down from the void by a sword qi. The remaining power was not enough to hurt Liang Jinfei, so he casually cut it down with his sword. Liang Jinfei broke out in a cold sweat. He didn't notice who was sneaking up on him, but he knew that if it weren't for Lu Ping's sword, even if he didn't die, he would probably be seriously injured by this flying needle. Liang Jianfei's eyes swept across the sky above the Feiliang mountain, but he still couldn't find who was sneaking up on him. At this time, the 7 fans Laozu and the others also noticed that Liang Jianfei was being attacked. They understood Lu Ping's intention, so they hurriedly protected him and retreated together. Liang Jianfei had no choice but to cup his fists towards Lu Ping and follow the cultivators of the Profound Sky Sect, Heavenly Moon Sect, Spirit Beast Sect, and other sects to the east. Xie Tianyang saw that Lu Ping saved him and became enemies with Xiao Baiyu, but in the blink of an eye, he also foiled the plot to kill Liang Jianfei. He couldn't help but ask, "Brother Lu, you?" Lu Ping smiled and said, "You're my brother, so I naturally have to save you. That Liang Jianfei is an ally of our sect, so I naturally have to save him." Xie Tianyang sighed and said, "There's no need to say thanks between us. It's just that you've offended Xiao Baiyu by saving me this time. I'm afraid you'll be blamed by both your sect and your allies." As he spoke, Wang Xianqing had already gathered the other 4 direct disciples. Xie Tianyang also went to meet up with them. Although Xiao Baiyu was seriously injured, the Purple Sun Palace had lost in the Battle of Swords. Tian Boyang had died, so the 6 swords of the Purple Sun Palace were now missing one. The heaven-splitting sword formation had been destroyed, but the Purple Sun Palace's losses would come in the future. However, Wang Xianqing was furious that the sects didn't save the scattered 6 swords, allowing them to be hunted down by Xiao Baiyu, which was worse than losing one of the 6 swords. It was clear that although the 6 swords' heaven-splitting sword formation had lost to Xiao Baiyu, the sword formation's power still struck fear in the pure Yang sect's hearts. It was inevitable that the various sects Laozu would harbor their own thoughts. It was precisely because of this that Wang Xianqing was even more grateful that Lu Ping had saved Xie Tianyang. However, Lu Ping wasn't willing to stay here any longer. By the time Xie Tianyang went to meet up with Wang Xianqing, he had already left Mount Feiliang with Qi Lianying. Before leaving, Qi Lianying pointed down and said, "Look." Lu Ping looked down and saw that Mount Feiliang, the highest peak of West River's cultivation world, had long since collapsed. The huge mountain seemed to have turned into a bloated mound after the collapse, and several other mountains that were even taller than Mount Feiliang had suddenly appeared around it. Lu Ping smiled and said, "The most famous mountain in West River, but after this battle, it will no longer exist in this world." Qi Lianying said regretfully, "Such a grand event has ended just like that." Lu Ping said, "What else can it be? It's already fortunate that there wasn't a large-scale conflict this time. If someone had really tried to kill Xiao Baiyu, I'm afraid the 7 fans Laozu and the other pure Yang sects would have been dragged into the battle. At that time, even I wouldn't have been able to escape. A chaotic battle was inevitable." Qi Lianying asked again, "Then where are we going next?" Lu Ping didn't even think about it and said, "I'm sending you back to the North Sea. Firstly, you still need to consolidate your cultivation. Secondly, the matter between you and Master, Senior Uncle Jiang, and Senior Uncle Mei has to be settled. Thirdly, I have something important to do in the Central Plains." Qi Lianying hesitated when he heard that he was going back to the North Sea. "I still want to go back to the East Sea." Lu Ping smiled and said, "Now that the Jingling Hibernation Island and the Whispering Waves Island have become one, it doesn't matter if you go back to the East Sea or the North Sea. Besides, this matter will eventually have to be faced. Don't worry, I'm here. No one will make you suffer." Qi Lianying giggled and asked, "What you're going to do is very dangerous, right?" Lu Ping hesitated for a moment, but still nodded and said, "It might be another world-shaking event." Qi Lianying stopped smiling and said, "In any case, you just have to be careful." The sword duel at Mount Feiliang ended with Ziyang Palace's defeat. The spectating cultivators all left. Lu Ping and Qi Lianying headed east, and soon saw the banks of Yulon River in the distance. Once they crossed the Yulon River, they would reach the cultivation world of Hebei. After that, they would reach the Yingshan courtyard and return to the North Sea through the secret teleportation formation. However, although 4 great practitioners are not weak when they join forces, I'm afraid it will still be difficult for them to keep me here. Ha 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 ha, the North Sea Water Sword Celestial is really heroic. How about we add in the old man? A rough voice sounded in the void, but it sounded quite old. However, Lu Ping could feel from the sudden burst of force in the void that it was also a great practitioner at the peak of the late Dharma Law's stage. Haha, the North Sea Zhenling is able to have such a reputation in the world of practitioners. A small part of the reason is because of this one person. If we leave him here today, the Zhenling is just a small sect in the North Sea after all. The sixth great practitioner at the late Dharma Law's stage spoke, and Lu Ping could no longer maintain the calm expression on his face. This was because at this moment, Lu Ping's divine will had finally broken through the cover of the spirit treasures that had previously concealed the figures of the people. This time, there were not 6 people waiting to ambush and kill Lu Ping, but 14. Lu Ping had already taken the opportunity to break through another cultivator's blockade after the sky full of sword rays. Qi Lianying, who had been dragged behind Lu Ping, sighed and said, "Let me go, or neither of us will be able to escape." "Cut the crap," Lu Ping shouted coldly, and his grip on Qi Lianying tightened. The streaks of light behind them were getting closer and closer, and so were the streaks of light that had circled around them. The 2 great cultivators who had been blocked by Lu Ping were also unwilling to give up and chased closely behind Lu Ping. A skylark and a flying sword broke through the void and chased after them again. At the same time, in the sky above the Yulon River, 3 streams of demonic qi rose into the sky and blocked in front of Lu Ping. One of them shouted, "Lu Tianping, you can't escape death today even if you grow wings." The 4th elder of the Tenma people. Lu Ping's expression changed. He didn't expect that there were 3 demonic qi cultivators hiding in the Yulon River. His expression became even colder and fiercer. "Good, good, good. Very good. In order to kill me, even the demonic qi cultivators have been mobilized," Lu Ping shouted. But the streaks of light didn't slow down at all. They didn't slow down because of the 3 demonic qi cultivators in front of them. Instead, they sped up. Seeing that Lu Ping wasn't panicking at all and was charging straight at them, the 4th elder of the Tenma people panicked for no reason. He couldn't help but think of how Lu Ping had defeated him when he was only at the mid-Dharma stage and became a great cultivator. Lu Ping had used him as a stepping stone to become famous. But now that the cultivators of various sects had gathered to set up such a killing trap, Ma the Great naturally didn't want his plan to kill Lu Tianping to fail because he was the last weak point. "Rush up and stop him," Ma the Great roared. He led the 2 Tenma people cultivators beside him and rushed towards Lu Ping. "Idiot, don't rush." A few roars came from the streaks of light behind and beside Lu Ping. At the same time, these streaks of light didn't care if they would expose a flaw in the formation that was surrounding Lu Ping and directly rushed towards Lu Ping. Lu Ping sneered and said, "It's too late." Lu Ping suddenly broke away from the magical power of transforming into water. He then spun around, and the sword of true spirit had already turned into 9 water dragons that rushed in all directions. Among them, there were a total of 6 water dragons that rushed towards Ma the Great. The 6 water dragons didn't wait for Ma the Great and the others to block them. Suddenly, after the 6 water dragons flew out from the sword light in Lu Ping's hand, 3 of them actually connected with each other and instantly devoured each other, forming a complete dragon-shaped sword qi. As it gathered together and opened its mouth, Ma the Great felt as if the entire void was collapsing and condensing. The mouth of the strange water dragon in front of him seemed to be expanding, as if it was going to devour the heavens and the earth. Ma the Great panicked. He stretched his hands to both sides, and in an instant, he grabbed the 2 mid-Dharma adepts of the Tenma people who came with him by the back of their necks. The 2 of them instantly couldn't move. The 2 Tenma people cultivators seemed to suddenly understand and cried out in shock, "Elder, what are you doing?" Ma the Great didn't dare to hesitate. He shook his arms, and the 2 Tenma people cultivators flew towards the mouth of the strange water dragon. Midway, the physical bodies of the 2 cultivators suddenly dissipated. 2 Dharma power of the heavenly horses raised their necks and neighed as they rushed towards the strange water dragon. In an instant, it was as if there were tens of thousands of galloping horses. One strange water dragon and two Dharma power of the two Tenma people cultivators fought against each other. The two Tenma people cultivators' Dharma power burned the last of their life force to unleash a power that could actually block Lu Ping's sword of opening the heavens. Ma the Great took advantage of the situation and retreated, breaking out of the strange water dragon's mouth. However, at that moment, Lu Ping had already rushed over. When Ma the Great saw Lu Ping's twisted and ferocious expression, he became even more flustered and instinctively wanted to dodge. Damn it! You can't do anything right. The cultivators who were chasing after Lu Ping immediately cursed. Several spells had already broken through the void and were chasing after Lu Ping. Although Lu Ping had been breaking out of the encirclement with ease, Ma the Great was still able to stop Lu Ping for a moment. In just that moment, the cultivators behind Lu Ping had already caught up. A huge bell suddenly rose up above Lu Ping's head. A statue that looked exactly like the strange water dragon's sword energy from before moved gracefully across the surface of the huge bell. In addition to the sharp and auspicious clouds carved on the surface of the bell, the vivid and lifelike strange water dragon looked as though it was riding on the clouds. 7 to 8 spells that were not inferior to great spells. Some of them even had the power of peerless spells, smashed towards Lu Ping. Quang! A loud noise suddenly rang out from the sky, spreading hundreds of li away. The weaker cultivators who were chasing after Lu Ping were momentarily stunned. By the time they recovered, they saw that Lu Ping had already broken through Ma the Great's obstruction and had arrived at the Yulon River. Next, they saw Lu Ping suddenly fling Qi Lianying, who had been tightly held by Lu Ping, out from behind Lu Ping, as though he was riding on the clouds. Qi Lianying was flung hundreds of zhang away by Lu Ping. Hurry up and leave. Staying here will only be a burden. Qi Lianying's beautiful, crimson silhouette was left behind in mid-air. After that, she fell into the Yulon River, disappearing without a trace. At this time, because Lu Ping paused for a moment after flinging Qi Lianying away, the cultivators behind him had once again caught up to him and surrounded him. He, Yuan Fei of the Crystal Palace, Yu Heng of the Wuxing School, Shui Jiro, Dongyi of the Blue Sea Sect, Ling Shu of the Spirit Martial Sect, Wu Jie of the Taishan Sect, the Fourth Elder of the Tenma People, Ru Shan of the Huta Sect, Yun Tian of the Flying Cloud Pavilion, and these 3 should also be cultivators from overseas. But I don't know which sect they are from. 12 great cultivators, what a grand scene. Lu Ping is greatly flattered. But I'm curious. Since all of you are gathered here, I believe that the magnetic stone plot must involve many people. Why didn't you call a few pure young cultivators? Chapter 1446. Haha, the 3 of us are indeed cultivators from overseas. To be exact, we are cultivators from the East Sea. I am Yuan Ong from the Crystal Palace. Greetings, North Sea Water Sword Deity. A great cultivator standing beside the slightly plump Yuan Fei Laozu said with a smile. Lu Ping replied with an "oh" and said to the other 2 unfamiliar cultivators beside him, then these 2 must be fellow cultivators from the Purple Talisman Pavilion and Gale Thunder Island? A purple-browed man beside Yuan Ong Laozu laughed and said, I am Qing Yuanqi from the Purple Talisman Pavilion. Greetings. A short and stocky cultivator standing beside him said in a low voice, Feng Zhonglei from Gale Thunder Island. 12 great cultivators had joined forces to kill Lu Ping. However, such a grand plan involved no less than 8 sects, including 2 sacred grounds. Therefore, this plan could be said to have involved many people. Moreover, all of these people had enmity or conflict with Lu Ping or Zhenling. However, why were the cultivators who surrounded and killed Lu Ping only at the late Dharma stage? With Lu Ping's current strength, if the Crystal Palace and Wuxing School simply sent a few pure young cultivators to kill him, wouldn't they have a higher chance of success? Although Lu Ping had such doubts, the joint attack of 12 great cultivators still put Lu Ping in an unprecedented life-threatening situation. Fellow cultivators, don't listen to this person's nonsense. This is a rare opportunity. We can take this chance to kill this person. If he becomes a troublemaker in the future, he will be a great threat to us. Moreover, we have already revealed ourselves in front of him today. Even if we let him go today, he will definitely seek revenge in the future. Dong Laozu was obviously the most enthusiastic person among these people about killing Lu Ping. Patriarch Dongyi's words clearly gained the approval of these great cultivators from the various sections. They had set up this trap for Lu Tianping precisely because they were afraid of his cultivation and strength. Now that he was able to fight a pure young cultivator despite being only a great cultivator, once he advanced to become a pure young cultivator, no one in the cultivation world would be able to stop him. However, Lu Ping knew the importance of striking first after being surrounded by these people. Just as Dong Laozu finished speaking, Lu Ping suddenly shouted and said, "Then let me kill you first." A cold light flashed out before Lu Ping's shout could be heard. The cold light morphed into a roaring Jiao dragon in midair and slammed into Dong Yi Grand Ancestor. Dong Laozu panicked. He used the Sea Transfer Medallion to absorb the water of the Yulon River and used the vast sea art to transform it into a huge dragon whale, which crashed towards the cold light dragon. Dong Laozu naturally knew that he could not fight against Lu Ping alone. The moment he attacked, he shouted, "Fellow cultivators, please help me." Dong Laozu, Wu Jie Laozu, and Yun Tian Laozu, who were next to him, hurried to help. In the west, Yuanfei Laozu shouted, "Do it!" Yuanfei, Yuan Ong, Cheng Yuanqi, and Feng Zhonglei clearly had a higher level of teamwork than the others. The four of them attacked first. Above Yuanfei and Yuan Eng's heads, a crystalline pagoda and a jade-white pagoda appeared. 7 of the 8 floors of the pagoda were instantly lit up by the two of them, and 2 supreme divine abilities formed and howled out from the 7th floor. At the same time, a palm-sized, rainbow-colored talisman appeared in Cheng Yuanqi's hands. The talisman began to light up, and a golden rock emerged from the flames. Its entire body was engulfed by the flames, and with a piercing cry, it charged towards Lu Ping. At the same time, a cyan lightning bolt also attacked. This lightning bolt was hidden behind the rock, and the rock took advantage of Yuanfei and Yuan Eng's supreme divine abilities to charge towards Lu Ping. The moment Lu Ping attacked Dong Laozu, he was already prepared to be attacked. The jade-white lotus under his feet shone brightly, and the 9-dragon bell above his head began to spin with a low buzzing sound. First, petals formed from watery light scattered around Lu Ping's body. Then, the 9-dragon bell released a bluish-purple light, and above this light shield, 9 golden dragon shadows danced. This was not the end. Lu Ping formed a sword technique with both hands, and a pair of flying swords filled the sky. Then, the swords turned into 2 coiling flood dragons, and the 2 flood dragons suddenly exploded. The Sea of 100 Rivers was instantly formed, and a huge whirlpool of sword light instantly swallowed the combined attack of the 4 great cultivators of the Eastern Sea. Just as Lu Ping used all kinds of methods to defend against the combined attack of the 4 great cultivators of the Eastern Sea, Ma the Great had already used the 10,000 horses galloping art and charged towards Lu Ping's back. However, while the Pegasus was still in the middle, Ma the Great let out a cry of surprise and staggered backwards. He saw a blue light flash in front of him, and it almost pierced his long face. Ma the Great's attack did not succeed, and he was almost ambushed by Lu Ping. He was extremely annoyed, and just as he was about to attack again, his long hair suddenly exploded behind him, as if a great danger was about to befall him. Ma the Great could no longer care about his annoyance, and his whole body flipped and fell towards the ground. Then, he heard a clear voice of a child shouting, "Kill!" A cold light flashed past, and half of Ma the Great's hair was sliced off, and the hair scattered in the air. Ma the Great could not help but feel a wave of fear in his heart. When he looked up, he saw that the child's facial features were 70% similar to Lu Tianping, and his level of practice had already reached the peak of the middle Dharma stage. After his attack had missed, he was now chasing after Ma the Great, like a tiger watching its prey. Ma the Great's attack had been thwarted, but there were still other people who were attacking Lu Ping with their magical powers. The moment Yu Heng Laozu of Wuxing School made his move, Lu Ping saw through him, and he shouted, "So, it turns out that the person who provoked me in the West River area is you. I'm afraid that the reputation of Wuxing School has been completely ruined by you." Yu Heng Laozu's face darkened, and he said in a low voice, "It's useless to say more. Today is the day that you, Lu Tianping, will die." The spirit treasure in Yu Hong Laozu's hand was replaced by a green, mountain-shaped spirit treasure. The moment it left his hand, it transformed into a 33 feet tall mountain, falling towards Lu Ping's head. The moment Yu Hong Laozu made his move, Rong Mountain Laozu of the Huda school let out a great roar and said, "Yu Hong, my friend, I am here to help you again." Rong Mountain Laozu pushed his hands forward and pressed down. Instantly, the 33 feet tall, green mountain was dyed with a layer of yellow earth. Along with a thunderous rumbling noise, Lu Ping's body had already been restrained by a tremendous downward force, which made it extremely difficult for him to move. The dragon-shaped statue, which was hovering above Lu Ping's head, screamed out in a voice that only Lu Ping could hear, "Think of a way. I don't want to be crushed into pieces." A faint blush flashed across Lu Ping's face. The Zhen Yuan inside his body was like a flood that was blocked by a dam and was preparing for the last moment of his life. All of a sudden, Lu Ping let out a great roar. 12 beams of multicolored light darted out from Lu Ping's body, and the yellow light that had been filling up the air was instantly shattered by the appearance of the 12 beams of multicolored light. At the same time, the enormous mountain that was falling down suddenly paused in the air. The 12 beams of multicolored light stood in different directions, resonating with the formation pattern of the lotus under Lu Ping's feet, firmly holding the falling mountain in the air. However, at this moment, a violent shaking came from the top of Lu Ping's head. The multicolored light of the 12 gentian beads flickered, and they were almost crushed by the mountain's spirit treasure. It turned out that after Lu Ping had just resisted the 2 attacks of Yu Hong Laozu and Rong Shan Laozu, Ling Su Laozu of the spirit martial sect seized the opportunity. While most of the power of the formation pattern of the white feather lotus was used to support the mountain of the gentian beads, Ling Su Laozu of the spirit martial sect broke the refining barrier in one fell swoop. 5 of the 9 dragon shadows on the wall of the 9 dragon bell were annihilated at once before the blow was barely blocked. Lu Ping suddenly suffered a heavy blow. Although he was not hurt, he had fought with 11 great cultivators in succession. Even as strong as Lu Ping was, the Zhen Yuan in his body was in a situation where he could not support it for a while. The blow of Ling Su Laozu made Lu Ping's situation even worse. The situation that he had struggled to maintain was almost ruined by this blow. Lu Ping spat out a mouthful of blood mist, but he took the opportunity to crush a top-grade spirit stone. With his own blood as the guide, he held a golden scissors in his hand. "Ling Su of the spirit martial sect, you deserve to die." This blow of Ling Su Laozu almost made Lu Ping fall into a hopeless situation, which naturally made Lu Ping extremely angry. He did not hesitate to use his own blood and profound qi to activate the pure yang spirit treasure. The surging pure yang qi constantly destroyed the soul of Ling Su Laozu, who had rushed to Lu Ping. Even the great cultivators who were besieging Lu Ping exclaimed, "Pure yang spirit treasure! It's pure yang spirit treasure!" Chapter 1447. Just when the practitioners of various sects besieging Lu Ping were still shocked by Lu Ping's sudden pure yang spirit treasure, Lingshu Laozu, who wanted to severely injure Lu Tianping with one blow and take the first merit, was scared out of his wits. Pure yang spirit treasure. Was it something he could withstand? "Friends of the Tao, help me!" Lingshu Laozu screamed in horror and struggled to retreat. Lu Ping smiled fiercely and said, "It's too late to escape now." The white jade lotus barrier that had just been broken by Lingshu Laozu closed in an instant. Lingshu Laozu rushed out like crazy. This time, he broke through the white jade lotus barrier again, but his figure was slowed down by the barrier. This slight delay was more than enough. The hand holding the pure yang spirit treasure opened and closed, and the 2 blade lights instantly closed. Lingshu Laozu's figure was still flying out, but suddenly it was cut in the middle. The part below the waist drew a parabola downward, and the part above the waist flew up. In fact, when Lingshu Laozu was flying away, he had tried his best to use the first tribulation spirit treasure in his hand to block the attack. However, In the face of the power of the pure yang spirit treasure, the first tribulation spirit treasure in his hand was cut in two like tofu. When the raging blade light cut Lingshu Laozu in two, the violent pure yang qi instantly broke through his heart-core space along his blood vessels. The second tribulation dharma form hiding in it did not even have time to escape before it was cut into ashes by the surging pure yang qi. Lingshu Laozu became the first sacrifice to kill Lu Ping this time. However, Lu Ping's thunderous attack not only did not frighten these great practitioners, but also aroused the greed of these people because of Lu Ping's endless spirit treasures during this period of siege. Even sacred land cultivators like Yuan Fei, Yuan Ong, Yu Hong, and Xue Jiro found it hard to control themselves in the face of so many spirit treasures. And now, with the appearance of a pure yang spiritual treasure, the greed of the various sects' old ancestors was triggered to the extreme. This Lu Tianping actually has a pure yang spiritual treasure. This pair of scissors looks familiar. Could it be the two halves of the Northern Alliance's numinous treasure that was originally in Chui's possession? Isn't that a second tribulation spirit treasure? After Chui fell, that spirit treasure disappeared. This one is obviously a pure yang, and the color doesn't seem right. That's nothing. Have you forgotten the great battle at the foot of Luo Xian Mountain years ago? The thunder tribulation of the pure yang spiritual treasure struck? The Wuxing school failed in the end. Even half of the water source that was connected to the school was cut off. Could it be that the thunder tribulation of the pure yang was caused by the pair of scissors in Lu Tianping's hand? Now you understand. The plan of the Wuxing school was not so much ruined by Xiao Baiyu and others. I'm afraid it was better to say that Lu Tianping took advantage of it in the end. A small part of the water source. No wonder this person's cultivation improved so fast. Wait, this person can cut off a small part of the water source. Doesn't it mean that this person has a spirit treasure imitation similar to the cauldron of heaven and earth? This person was known as Treasure Boy in the North Sea. In today's battle, he showed 4 or 5 spirit treasures. This person must die today. These spirit treasures should be ours. Although Lu Ping suddenly took out the pure yang spiritual treasure to kill Lingshu Laozu, the appearance of the pure yang spiritual treasure did not alert the 11 grand practitioners who besieged Lu Ping. Instead, it intensified their greed. Element Fatty Laozu shouted, "Lu Tianping, how dare you?" That year, when Chui of the Northern Alliance was attacked and died, his spirit treasure was cut in two and disappeared. So it was all you're doing? Let me ask you, old man. At that time, Mara's army was besieging the Phantom Island. Did you collude with Mara's army? Or did you Zhengling have some secret plot? Lu Ping snorted coldly. The sword of true spirit suddenly collapsed and turned into 9 flood dragons. Once again, Element Fatty Laozu was caught off guard. Yuan Ong, Cheng Yuanqi, and Feng Zhonglei hurried to help him. If you want to blame someone, you can always find a pretext. Today, you want to kill Lu Ping. Have you thought about who you want to bury with you? Lu Ping held the pure yang spiritual treasure in his hand. His eyes swept across the Laozu who besieged him. For a moment, no one dared to look at Lu Ping in the eye. 12 grand practitioners besieged Lu Ping. If they could really work together, Lu Ping would not have been able to resist until now. It was precisely because Lu Ping knew that these people had their own plans. They were waiting for others to die, so they could reap the benefits. That was why Lu Ping was able to fend off so many people's encirclement. And after Lu Ping suddenly cast out a pure yang spirit treasure and killed Spirit Su ancestor, not only did it not arouse the other great cultivators' common hatred, but it also made them even more greedy. As a result, they were even more determined to let Lu Ping and the others die while they followed behind to reap the benefits. Lu Ping shouted to make these people even more afraid. With Lu Ping's strength comparable to that of a pure yang, and now that he had the pure yang spiritual treasure, it would not be easy to kill Lu Ping without leaving a few lives. But the key was whose life should be left, and who should be the last one to reap the benefits. Wuxing School's Yu Hung Laozu seemed to understand something at this moment. He asked loudly, "Lu Tianping, the person hiding in the water vein at the foot of Luo Xen Mountain was you? Did you kill our formation great master Jin Chan Laozu? Did you get this pure young spiritual treasure because you stole half of our water transformation talisman? Also, did you kill the water transformation ape? In fact, when Lu Ping used the pure young spiritual treasure, the unsolved cases that had been left in the cultivation world over the years had come to light. The battle at the foot of Luo Xian Mountain could be said to be a contest of power between all the pure young forces in the cultivation world. Everyone present naturally knew about such a big event. Yu Heng Laozu's question was meaningless to them. It was just a kind of righteous venting. Only the water transformation ape at the end made them somewhat puzzled. However, when Yu Heng Laozu mentioned the water transformation ape, Lu Ping already understood that he was referring to the water ape weapon spirit of the cauldron of heaven and earth. In reality, whether it was the Linglong wine cauldron, the sword of true spirit, or the two pieces of pure yang spiritual treasure, the reason why they could become second tribulation spiritual treasures so quickly was because even if Lu Ping wholeheartedly nurtured them with his own vital energy, he might not be able to improve their quality so quickly. The most important reason was that during the battle at the foot of Luo Xian Mountain, Lu Ping had used all kinds of spiritual treasures to kill the water ape weapon spirit in the water vein. His subordinates had all swallowed the water ape weapon spirit's source, which caused their quality to improve so quickly. It should be known that the water ape weapon spirit was one of the 5 great weapon spirits of the cauldron of heaven and earth. Lu Ping said mockingly, "You are really slow to realize." Yu Heng Laozu said angrily, "Outrageous, then go die." Yu Heng Laozu suddenly rose into the sky and landed on the 33-meter-tall emerald green mountain. Lu Ping felt an unparalleled force descend from the sky. The white jade lotus formation spirit's light flickered, and the 12 gentian beads that held up the giant mountain kept falling. Ring, ring, ring. Seeing her martial uncle going all out, Shui Jiro naturally did not want to fall behind. She kept ringing the rain bell in her hand like a soul-summoning bell. Every ringing sound penetrated Lu Ping's divine sense, trying to interfere with Lu Ping's control over the spiritual treasures in his hand. "You still haven't made any progress," Lu Ping sneered. A blue sky curtain suddenly fell from above Lu Ping's head. Above the clouds, a golden pong kept circling around the 9-dragon bell. Seeing this, Shui Jiro snorted coldly. The watery mist in the air condensed into a gigantic sky eagle, which clawed towards the golden pong. However, before the sky eagle could approach, Lu Ping pointed his finger at the sky eagle with a taunting look. Instantly, the sky eagle, which was condensed from watery mist, exploded into a puff of watery mist once again. "Your water-controlling skill is still too weak." Before he could enjoy Shui Jiro's angry and humiliated look, Lu Ping raised his hand and waved his hand. Ein Water Divine Thunder descended and merged with the Water Darkness Sword, transforming into the thunder-shocking sword spell. Rong Mountain Laozu, who was trying to help Laozu again, was forced back. At the same time, Lu Ping threw out a purple jade bracelet. The bracelet expanded and encircled Lu Ping in the middle. After that, an enormous purple jade bracelet was pushed outwards, forcing Yun Tian, Wu Jie, Dong Yi and the others, who were trying to attack Lu Ping, back. However, at this time, Yu Heng Laozu, who was already at the top of the Emerald Peak, shouted, "Fall!" The entire peak suddenly sank again above Lu Ping's head. At this time, Lu Ping was using many spirit treasures to resist the siege of 11 great cultivators. This attack from Yu Heng Laozu made Lu Ping feel as if his heart was suddenly hit by a hammer. His whole body sank down, and he spat out another mouthful of blood. Bean-sized beads of sweat seeped from Lu Ping's temples and quickly covered his forehead. Lu Ping smiled coldly. He looked up at the emerald peak that covered the sky above him and said, "Since you are so eager to die, I will fulfill your wish." Great Gentian Formation, Suppressing Mountain. Following Lu Ping's shout, the 100-origin lotus formation under his feet suddenly shone brightly. The white jade lotus flowers in the surroundings bloomed one after another, and dense formation runes flashed on the formation. The 12 gentian pearls that originally supported the emerald peak shone with a brilliant 5-colored light. At the same time, the sword whirlpool formed by the thin water-flowing sword suddenly collapsed. Countless sword lights crisscrossed, causing Laozu and the others to be thrown into confusion. The pure young spirit treasure that had been expanding and contracting outside was suddenly opened and closed several times by Lu Ping, causing the great cultivators to jump up and down in fright. The flood dragon formed by the sword of true spirit instantly shrank back around Lu Ping's body and firmly protected him. The sword of true spirit once again disappeared into the void. Not good. This Lu Tianping is trying to escape. No, he's not escaping. Quickly attack. This kid is putting up a turtle shell. A 5-colored space immediately formed. Yu Hung Laozu, who was sitting cross-legged on the top of the emerald peak, panicked and suddenly felt the giant peak he was sitting on collapse. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.